Hello, Innovate 2021. I am Capture Higher Ed CEO Len Napolitano, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our national two-day virtual conference. First, I would like to thank you, our vibrant higher education enrollment and marketing community, for attending our conference. Over 1,000 of you from across the globe signed up for Innovate 2021, and we appreciate you spending your valuable time with us as you finish up perhaps one of the strangest and craziest college recruitment cycles in recent history. Secondly, I also want to thank our Capture team for organizing this outstanding event. And of course, I need to thank our talented keynote speakers, presenters, and panelists for sharing their expertise and knowledge with us throughout the conference. I can't wait to see these sessions. At Capture, we believe in making every interaction count. That's what we do every day with our behavioral intelligence platform that combines marketing automation and predictive modeling to support the entire student recruitment journey in order for any higher education institution to identify, convert, and enroll the right student. Our team of industry experts do this by using best-in-class marketing solutions and other services to support your mission. Our conference, Innovate, started at the beginning of 2020 to bring innovative ideas to our clients via a roadshow. We started first in Louisville, then Philadelphia, and we had more planned throughout the country. When the pandemic hit, we realized we needed to make our conference virtual so anyone could attend by streaming it via 5 platforms and making it free to any educator. We saw a need to convene the entire higher education enrollment and marketing community, enrollment leaders, admissions counselors, marketing professionals, recruitment experts from every corner of the globe to talk strategy. And that's what we did last June. Innovate, the industry's first virtual conference for enrollment professionals, is back for round 2, broadcasting live from over a dozen US cities. This year's theme is clarity and creativity. And we want you to emerge from the following 2 days with clear, creative, and actionable enrollment and marketing strategies to help you address today's college recruitment landscape. We want you to be able to leave today with professional inspiration and motivation and ideas from our wonderful panelists that I mentioned earlier. Our sessions today are meant to inspire, and we start with our opening keynote by Dr. Natalie Nixon, who will talk to us about navigating uncertainty. We also have sessions on building a stronger inquiry pool for graduate programs using multi-channel marketing. And that's at 2:05 with our friends from Jacksonville University in Florida. We will have a joint session by Capture and Platform Q Education that will cover recent collegial case studies from institutions that combine behavioral intelligence with continuous content at 2:45. And we'll end the day with a panel discussion, what new virtual methods we will keep post-pandemic when enrollment leaders from the universities of Memphis, Toledo, South Carolina, and George Mason University will be hashing out that question at 3:15. Throughout the session, we encourage you to ask any question, and you can do this by submitting your questions in the comments section of whatever platform you're viewing the conference on. Before we jump into these amazing sessions, I need to handle some housekeeping. Your registration for Innovate 21 entered you to win giveaway and prizes throughout the conference. I'm very pleased that Capture is giving away 2 $500 merit-based scholarships for a student to attend your institution. Other prizes include AirPods, Apple Watch, $100 Amazon gift cards, all access masterclass passes, and a trip to Paris, Kentucky. I share that in jest, but we are excited that you're attending and we want to make it fun. And so we just need for you to take one more step to qualify for today's drawings. Go to your LinkedIn account and share Capture's post from today with a comment using the hashtag Innovate2021. Simply just share your post and you're entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card or an Apple Watch. That's right, just using the hashtag Innovate2021. Posts are being monitored, and winners will be selected through a random drawing. The prizes will be raffled to those who share Capture's LinkedIn post on the day of the event. Also, for the second year in a row, I'm proud to share Innovate 2021 will have a philanthropy component. Throughout the next 2 days, Capture will match attendee donations up to $5,000 to the Boys and Girls Club of America and the National Urban League. These are wonderful organizations doing important work, and we're proud to support them. Look out for a link on where to donate, which we'll share throughout the event and also on our social media. Now it's my honor to introduce Innovate 2021's MCs, Heather Mueller and Lauren Gold. Heather has been a key member of Capture since its inception. And prior to joining Capture, she has extensive experience in higher education, particularly enrollment management. Before coming to Capture, she worked at institutions such as Lincoln College in Illinois, Thomas University in Georgia, Rutgers University, and Illinois State. At Capture, Heather has spearheaded a number of initiatives to include launching our behavioral intelligence platform across hundreds of programs, enabling our clients to identify, convert, and enroll the right student. Joining her today is Lauren Gold. And many of you probably have engaged with Lauren, as she's our Director of Account Executives and has been with the company for nearly 4 years. Prior to joining Capture, Lauren worked at the Sullivan University system, leading the undergraduate counseling team across 7 campuses. Today, she leads a team of account executives who work with every single client to execute their strategic plans using Capture's marketing solutions and behavioral intelligence platform. You'll be seeing Heather and Lauren throughout Innovate 2021 as they recap previous sessions, introduce upcoming sessions, take questions, have banter, announce raffle winners, and more. Also, if you're interested in finding out more about Capture solutions and services, reach out to Heather and Lauren throughout the conference or even after the conference, and they'd be delighted to put you in contact with the right person. Now, it's time to introduce our first keynote, Navigating Uncertainty with Dr. Natalie Nixon. A global speaker, Dr. Nixon is the creative strategist and president of Figure 8 Thinking and the author of the book, The Creative Leap. Unleash curiosity, improvisation, and intuition at work. Through her work, she emboldens leaders and organizations to apply creativity and foresight for transformative results. For leaders in higher education to emerge out of this new normal stronger and more inspired, Dr. Nixon believes you must utilize creativity to enable future-friendly transformation and navigate ambiguous terrain. During her presentation, she will explain how practical creativity techniques can help us navigate this murky terrain, shift our mindset, and stretch our thinking in life. Today, she will offer us an alternate lens to view the trajectory of our work and gain inspiration to move forward amid uncertainty. She will also teach us how to adapt and disrupt our own thinking for more meaningful outcomes. I want to read you a passage that I thought was fitting for our community. From her chapter, Commune, Come Together to Create. She writes, fast forward decades later, at 8:30 on a Sunday mornings, I show up at Dance Fit to begin my ritual of a thorough stretch class, followed by a vibrant, sweaty, booty-shaking hip-hop dance class. It is a form of restoration and renewal for me. What most excites me about these classes is that they are my way of getting back to my dance tribe. And through this chapter, she talks to us about the importance of the tribe and ends this passage by saying, I reference tribes because I believe that sense of community and the ability to work together towards a common goal are essential to creativity. Community is the ideal space in which wonder and rigor can thrive. I could not think of a more fitting passage for our education community, and it's my pleasure to present Dr. Natalie Nixon.
Thank you so much, Nappy. Thank you for that awesome introduction. Thank you, Capture Higher Ed, and the entire community who is gathered here today. You know, it's funny, I'm still am very active with dance, but I actually took an outdoor hip hop dance class last night. It's been a true lifesaver for me during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's begin. Over the next 45 minutes, I would like to share some ideas, pose some questions, and also offer a little takeaway for you all as well. So let's begin with me sharing my screen. And great, it looks like that's all good. So we're talking about navigating uncertainty. And I actually want to begin with an illustration that to me tells such an incredible story. This was on the cover of the December 7th, 2020 New Yorker magazine. It's an illustration by the cartoonist Adrian Tomine. This is called Love Life. And one of the things I love about Love Life, this illustration, is that it has so many scrumptious details. In fact, each time I revisit it, I see a new detail. So for example, the young lady who's on a Zoom date of some sort, you can see that her legs aren't shaven, that her bedroom is a hot mess, her kitchen is full of dirty dishes, she's got several bottles of wine on the top of the fridge. And in the full illustration, you can see even more details. But I'm starting with this image because the past 18 months or so have been a time, a chapter of our world, of our lives, when we've had to navigate increasingly blurred boundaries between work and home, work and learning, as you all are astutely aware of, and learning and play and work and play. And I believe that this illustration is actually some foreshadowing for what awaits us, foreshadowing, but yet hopefully we've learned some incredible lessons about ways that we can navigate this uncertainty, these blurred boundaries in ways that aren't, that won't make us feel as unsettled as I'm sure the young woman on this Zoom date is feeling in this context. And I also want to give a nod to another article I read. This one was much earlier in 2020. This was back in March of 2020. This was an interview in the Harvard Business Review with one of the world's foremost thought leaders on the topic of grief. And this gentleman's name is David Kessler. He was interviewed by Scott Baronato. And there were two major takeaways I had from reading the interview with Mr. Kessler. Number one, the 5 stages of grief that we typically think of, and those are denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and then finally acceptance. These stages are totally nonlinear. So if you, like me, have been feeling like an emotional ping pong ball, you're not alone. It's totally normal. If you feel yourself on one day totally accepting of our new normal, and then the next day going into denial or bargaining, then slump into sadness, and then you're okay again. You accept things. So the first takeaway was that the stages, the so-called stages of grieving, are nonlinear. And here was the next takeaway, which I thought was fascinating. He said we should actually add on a 6th stage of grief. We shouldn't end on acceptance. We should actually end on meaning, MEANING. And the reason why that really resonates with me is that as a creativity strategist, I know that creativity is all about the business of meaning making. Creativity is what helps us identify purpose and helps us to identify our next normal. And we're having to do this in the midst of what I would call a triple pandemic. This is a pandemic that's been gunning for us on the health dimensions, and also these other 3 ways. Societally, so we've seen in the United States in the unforgettable summer of 2020 of all the social justice protests, which culminated in the insurrection in January of 2021, a kind of a social pandemic. We've experienced certainly our centennial generation. We have my husband and I, we have a 20-year-old daughter who's going to her junior year in college. This is a generation that is astutely aware of the constraints on our environment. So we're going through an environmental pandemic. and of course the health pandemic. So there's a lot that we're having to navigate. There's a lot to grieve. There's a lot of loss. And if we understand that in the process of navigating these blurred boundaries, that we could really end not on the plateau of acceptance, but on this uptick of meaning, that is everything. And the great news is that creativity helps us to navigate that uncertainty. It helps us to identify a new true north and a new way forward. Now, I've been really interested in how many incredible leaders around the world of some of the largest companies in the world have been talking unabashedly about the value of empathy. So, for example, Frederick Furt, who is the chief innovation evangelist at Google, spoke back in January of this year about how empathy is the skill of the future. And I agree that empathy is the skill of the future, but I would add on a bit to Mr. Furt's assertion. And I would say that we're missing a step if we only start with empathy. Because before empathy, we actually have to start with curiosity. Because curiosity is the precursor to empathy. And in my view, curiosity is the currency of the future. And those who work in higher education, as you all well know, you are all about building the capacity for curiosity. And now more than ever, this is an essential capability. So here's how I like to think about how important and how valuable curiosity is. So curiosity is the precursor to empathy. Empathy ideally will lead to action, and then action hopefully will lead to equity. So there is a solid through line from building curiosity and the capability of curiosity to building equity in all of our systems of society. And I like to call this the curiosity factor, which is fundamental to creativity. You know, Ray Dalio, who is the chief investment officer at Bridgewater, has said that great questions are a much better indicator of future success than great answers. And any of you who have ever been in the classroom, I think you would agree. And I should just reveal that I was a professor for 16 years. So I certainly agree with this assertion. I can tell so much more about the quality of a person's mind by the types of questions that they pose, much more so than the answers that they regurgitate. So as a creativity strategist, I spend a lot of my time collecting signals on the landscape. Part of my practice incorporates foresight. Now, foresight really has nothing to do with telling or predicting the future. Foresight is actually about being incredibly situated and rooted in the present. So I want to share with you some of the signals on the landscape that I've been collecting that point to the value of curiosity, empathy, creativity, in short, the value of what I like to call the human quotient. So the first thing I'll reference is a really nifty offering that's just taken off in the past 2 years. It's called Masterclass, and my husband gifted it to me for Mother's Day about 2 or 3 years ago. I became an instant fan. And as a former academic, one of the things I really appreciated about Masterclass is that it really hits the crux of what we would call edutainment, right? It's really good at curating incredible thought leaders who are subject matter experts, who have the street cred to prove that they know what the heck they're talking about, mixed in with a high production value. And it's learning on the time of the learners, on their means and on their basis, right? So it's not about, you got to come to class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for this 50-minute block of time. No, it's about co-creating and curating a learning offering on the timing that works for the learner. This is significant. The second signal that I think is really interesting, this actually showed up in my inbox 2 months ago. I don't know about you all who have taught before, who work in higher education, but certainly someone like me who there's a chapter of my life where I was a middle school English teacher. I then became a professor for 16 years. I used to really wince at some impolite comments I would hear or overhear that would say things like, well, those who can't teach, because that clearly was an ignorant comment by someone or persons who have no idea about what's involved in the skill and the expertise and the craft of teaching. So it's phenomenal to me now of how many industries and sectors and companies are getting into the learning business. So this was cool. Fast Company offers a slew of courses. LinkedIn offers a slew of courses. And again, learning on the time of the people, right? In ways and means that make sense for them. But this was an interesting module. This was all about future-proofing your career. And what I dug was that the modules, the subsets in this particular course included design thinking, communicating with flair, personal growth, creativity and innovation, networking, and personal branding. So how fascinating it's been to me to see these signals on the landscape that are really speaking to the democratization of learning, as well as all of those skills that are so hard to teach that we previously have not spent a lot of time on. I've been predicting for quite some time that we're going to see a return to the apprenticeship model. We're going to see, sadly, some casualties in higher education coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, but out of crisis, out of challenges and failures come opportunities for private sector and the educational sector to merge and to form interesting strategic partnerships. And I don't think this will be an apprenticeship model that we saw in the medieval times, but it will be an incredibly dynamic one that will be age diverse, that will be socioeconomically diverse, and that will emerge just at a time where we're seeing several cracks in the system of higher education. The other signals on the landscape that I have been collecting come from our popular culture. I love a good television series, and you have to admit, TV has never been better. Thank you, Netflix, and thank you, Hulu. And so I want to point to a few other signals from our popular culture that point to all roads really leading to the buildup of the human quotient. So the first example on the left is a hit television a sitcom called Blackish. And this is the character Junior. He is in this scene explaining in an exasperated fashion to his parents that, yes, I realize it, I've got into college, but I don't want to go right away. I want to take a gap year. And to his solidly bourgeoisie African-American parents, they are stunned, they are disgusted, they're mortified. They've worked all of his life to make sure he gets to the point where he can be college educated. Now, around the same time, a different television show was on where there was a similar subplot. This is second image is from the show Big Little Lies. And this is the character Abigail, who also exasperatedly, notice the body language of these two teens, how they mirror each other. She's explaining to her mom, Madeline, who's played by Reese Witherspoon, that, look, Mom, I don't even want to take the standardized tests. I don't want to go to college. In fact, I already have a job with a startup. Now, her mother is mortified because she never went to college. She was placing all of her hopes and dreams that her kid would go to college. Now, why do these two examples matter? They matter because we are seeing indicators in our popular culture that Gen Z, the centennials, are questioning the ROI of higher education. They're questioning the debt that they incur. They're questioning the teaching model. They want to learn by doing. They want to learn experientially. All roads for me that point to the value of creativity. And the last signal that I'll share for our time together today is this is from another great television show, Billions. This is the character Wendy Rhodes, and she works at Axe Capital. She's not just works at Axe Capital, she's among the C-suite. Now, this was significant to me because Wendy's character, Wendy Rhodes, is a psychologist. And I thought, this is fascinating. Here is this testosterone-driven VC firm where everyone wakes up every single day to make another 100 millions or so on the margin. And they have sitting with the founder, the CTO, the chief legal counsel, a psychologist. And what does she do? Her role is to help the teams individually. She'll have sessions with them. She helps them to tap into their inner child, visualize their future, meditation, deep breathing, right? I have a liberal arts background. I studied anthropology and Africana studies in college. And I love that we see this indicator of the value of the humanities in the midst of a pretty traditional sector like financial services. So what's the headline out of all of this? Soft skills are hardcore. Soft skills like empathy, curiosity, collaborating, negotiating, active listening, creativity are not these woo-woo, frilly addendums. They are central and core to the work that lies ahead of us in the future of work. So this led me to the question, how might we design in more curiosity into our work, into our services, and your work, into the ways that you recruit, into the ways you're building these cultures of learning? Well, here's the thing. In a world where we now know that we can work from anywhere, we can learn from anywhere, we can work from home, those organizations that work at the intersection of productivity, technology, and meaningful human connected experience will be the ones that thrive. These are the organizations and the institutions which will flourish. Now, what's happened is that most organizations have at least one of these down. They probably have the productivity one down, or so they think. Maybe they have two. Probably productivity and technology is what they're honing in on. And they may be stumbling a bit with the tech, but very few have figured out to also integrate on a consistent basis meaningful human experience and connection. Now, I'm biased, but I believe that creativity is the through line that connects productivity, technology, and experience. So let's dig a little bit more about why and how creativity is so increasingly significant now in this fourth industrial revolution and for the future of work and the future of learning. So the World Economic Forum has been ranking creativity as the number 3 job skill for 2020 and beyond since 2016. And what I find really fascinating is that 1 year prior, in 2015, they said, creativity is going to rank as the number 10 job skill for 2020 and beyond. And 1 year later, they changed their minds and bumped it up to number 3. And it's funny because job skills numbers 1 and 2 are critical thinking and problem solving, which PS, that's still creativity. Stillcase has done some dynamic research where they've learned that 55% of people want to be more creative in their role. 19% point to lack of guidance or permission. And they also learned that the younger generations, Gen Y and Gen Z, they're showing a lot more creative ambition than older workers. Degreed and Fidelity Investments have also done some interesting research linking creativity to the roles of upskilling and reskilling. So I keep dancing around this question. And if you're wondering, well, how the heck do I define creativity? I don't fault you. So let's get into that. What is creativity? And I want you to pause and think to yourself, do you consider yourself creative? Who comes to mind for you when you think of creativity and creative people and creative endeavors? Well, a lot of the time in my consulting, especially in corporate environments, when I hear things, people mutter things like, oh, I'm not creative because I can't, fill in the blank, draw, paint, sing, dance, act, etc., right? Or I might hear, well, the creatives will take care of that later, or the creative team will do that. And what's happening is that often when we hear the word creativity and creative, we're thinking about musicians or visual artists, and maybe we have this really idealized vision of them. And in this image, a young lady whiling away the afternoon with the sunlight streaming down on her as she paints away. Perhaps we think of dancers who are skilled and talented and being able to tell story through movement. So artists, yes, are absolutely creative. But the challenge is that when we only conflate creativity with art and artists, we're missing the full picture. Because when we do that, we're ghettoizing creativity. We are siloing it. It just so happens that artists are outstanding at manifesting the ambiguous process of creativity. They don't shirk away from it. But if we only make creativity synonymous with art or artists, then A, that's not fair to artists, and B, that's not beneficial to our society at large. I tend to think of creativity in the following way. I define creativity as our ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems. And usually I stop right there, but sometimes I'll add on and create novel value. And that value can be financial value, cultural value, social value. So all of my thinking and ideas and probing about what creativity is all wrapped up in a book that I wrote, which Nappy so kindly referred to in his introduction, a book called The Creativity Leap, where I explain and share all sorts of ideas and thoughts and frameworks and tips and techniques to help us get better at toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. I interviewed over 50 people who come from a range of sectors and backgrounds to really test out this idea and understand, does this concept of toggling between wonder and rigor make sense to you? So let me share a few examples of some of the people I interviewed. So the woman in the black dress is Nicole Pittman. Nicole is an attorney, and she's one of the United States' foremost thought leaders and policymakers on a difficult topic of child sex offenders. And what I learned from Nicole was her uncanny ability to pose new and different questions in order to create alliances and bridge opposite sides of the aisle. The woman smelling my arm is Céline Barrel. Céline is a nose. She's a perfumer, and she's a nose at IFF, which is the International Flavors and Fragrances Association. She's actually from France. She's from Grasse, France, which is the center of the perfume industry in Europe. And what I learned from Céline was her incredible ability to balance chemistry and intuition. And Céline likes to say that her superpower is her ability to make real what no longer exists. So think about that. Think about when you smell a particular scent and it takes you back to a time or to a person or to an experience that is no longer real, but can be but that can become so vibrant again when you smell that scent. For me, when I smell Old Spice, I think of my pop, I think of my dad. I always consistently. The couple on the bottom left are Gary and Amy Mainoff. I'm from Philly, and just outside of Philadelphia is where their 5-acre fruit farm is in New Hope, Pennsylvania. And they're standing in front of their newest innovation. Now, I would like to just pause here and share that I define an innovation as an invention converted into value. While it's still an invention, it's not yet an innovation, but until it's converted into, I should add, scalable value, again, financial, social, and cultural value, then it becomes an innovation. So what's the conversion factor? Creativity. Creativity is how you go from an invention to an innovation. And that's exactly what happened to Gary and Amy. If you think that you have it bad trying to navigate a VUCA world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, try being a farmer. Farmers are the original hackers. They wake up every morning to contend with the uncertainty of the earth. And long story short, to read more about this story, you could read it in the book. But Gary and Amy essentially did a lot of research, a ton of experimentation, a ton of improvisation before they landed on their newest offering to their customers. They grow apples and pears and nectarines and peaches and berries throughout the summer, the apples and pears in the fall and winter. And they have now an incredible cidery vertical as part of their business. The gentleman in the middle is Randy Swearer. He's a former colleague of mine. He's now the vice president of learning futures at Autodesk. And I learned from Randy the ways that Autodesk uses orthogonal thinking, which is another way of talking about cognitive diversity. They make sure that they interrupt themselves and disrupt their own thinking by inviting in people from totally different backgrounds and sectors, a PhD in anthropology or astronomy, a former military general, a former head of a labor union, to look at problems that they've been staring at for months and ask and pose new questions. The gentleman in the black and white photograph is our family plumber, John Harker. And when I asked to interview him for a book on creativity, he thought I was kidding. And I was like, no, I really want to talk to you about creativity and your work. And once he started sharing stories and speaking, he waxed poetic. He's really a systems designer because he has to connect with and navigate between the carpenters, the electricians, the homeowners, the all of the different stakeholders involved in any kind of home construction project. And finally, in the red t-shirt, we have Daniel Goods. Daniel is the head of the studio at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. So I traveled out to Pasadena, California, met with Daniel and his team of social scientists, designers, and artists, and learned the ways that they serve as internal provocateurs for all of the heavy-duty aerospace engineering, scientific projects and experiments that are going on at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. This is creativity. These are examples of creativity as much as the examples that are go-tos in the arts. So here's what I want you to really have clarity on. That creativity is a productivity play, and it is fundamental for well-being. It's also a competency. It's something that we can exercise and get better at. Right now, in this fourth industrial revolution, there are 4 creativity leaps that we must make if we're going to survive the next 5 to 50 years. Number 1, we've got to leap away from only valuing our deep specialization and expertise to valuing being polymaths and recruiting for polymaths and developing polymaths. Number 2, we've got to leap away from only erring on the side of rationality and what's logical to also valuing what's ambiguous and becoming what I call ambiguous friendly and ambiguous confident. Number 3, we have to leap away from building organizations constructed of silos to really building community. And that short passage, excuse me, that short passage that Nappy shared was really about was kind of a preview into me talking about the connection between tribes and community. Community consists of tribes, but we have to go beyond our tribes in order to truly build community. And finally, we have to leap away from grasping onto that rule book to really building a plug and play playbook. So I propose, in order to make those leaps, that we've got to navigate and manage complexity with complexity. And as it turns out, the creativity is a very complex system. And here's what I mean by that. Creativity is actually a chaotic system. And a chaord is a word that D. Hock made up. D. Hock, some of you may know, was the founder, the first president of Visa, the credit card company. And when Mr. Hock in the early 60s was given this charge of leading a global organization based on the virtual exchange of currency, he thought, let me go take a walk. He was a big naturalist. And he observed that in nature, there's some chaos, but there's also order. And, my words, not Mr. Hock's, he was essentially identifying that organizations are organisms. So he thought to himself, what if I could design an organization that mimicked the ways that nature's systems works? What if I could design an organization consisting of some chaos and some order? And he did a mashup of the 2 words, and he made up the word chaord. I want to create an organization that is chaotic, that has some chaos and some order. And this now is a fundamental component of chaos theory and organizational design. And once you start learning about chaotic systems, you see them everywhere because chaotic systems are emergent, they're self-organizing, and they are adaptive. So for example, the way in nature woods, jungles evolve over eons requires some chaos, some randomness, and some order. So chaos is not anarchy. Chaos is all about being random, and order is not about control. Order is about structure. So if you think about the way a sapling takes root on the earthen floor, and over time grows into a tree, that's a combination of randomness, but also order in terms of plant science. The ways our bodies heal, if you skin your knee, there's not this permission slip culture going on. There's localized, self-organizing, emergent systems at work to ensure the healing of your knee. And jazz music is an incredible example of a chaotic system. The order shows up in the fact that jazz musicians practice incessantly. They know music theory. Their musical compositions have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a chord progression you're going to play through, etc. That's the order part. The chaos is the magic that happens in the interstices, and that is improvisation. All improvisational systems are complex, chaotic systems. So you can kind of sense the influence of chaotic systems on me in the way I think about creativity. Wonder is the chaos part, and rigor is the order part. So let's look a little bit more into wonder. Wonder is about curiosity and dreaming, pretending, supposing. It's often performative, and it's about envisioning really audacious futures. Wonder also requires us to pause, and it's about awe. And I was really happy to learn that some real intellectual heavy hitters have given a lot of credence to wonder. So Socrates said that wisdom begins in wonder. And centuries later, the Jewish theologian and civil rights activist Abraham Heschel wrote that it's wonder rather than doubt, which is the root of all knowledge. So whatever you carry forward from this conversation, this talk today, I want you to take away with you being able to identify who for you are your wonder mentors, living or dead, people you know, people in your family, people you work with. The reason why this matters is that when we catch ourselves falling off the track of having not enough wonder in our lives and in our work, we've got to be able to call upon, excuse me, examples of people, of mentors, of folks we know, folks we aim to be like in our lives, who exhibit the practices, the habits of wonder. So for me, I have a lot of wonder mentors, but children are consistently some of my best wonder mentors. They are exceptional at asking questions, at dreaming, at posing big what if questions, at envisioning, at pausing, and at being in awe of the ordinary. So make sure you can name at least 2 people, living or dead, who you can consider your wonder mentor. Then rigor. Rigor is about practice, discipline, time on task, showing up over and over and over again. Is about commitment. Rigor is often very solitary work. It's not particularly sexy, and it is an essential component and dimension of creativity. Creativity is not doing whatever you feel like. Creativity is not pulling something random out of your armpit. There's so much intentionality and work and discipline and the order part, the structure, that's a part of rigor. Leonardo da Vinci, the original Renaissance man himself, said that any obstacle can be destroyed through rigor. So, where this is leading, I want you to think about, for you and your life and your work, who comes to mind as a rigor mentor? Who can you have as kind of your own personal avatar that gets you back on track to start learning and cultivating habits of rigor? So for me, one of my rigor mentors is the American dancer and choreographer Twyla Tharp. Twyla Tharp has a great book called The Creative Habit. And in that book, one of the brilliant things she writes is that before you can think out of a box, you got to start with a box. And that summarizes why rigor is important so well. So one of the things that Twyla Tharp does, even into her elder years, is every single morning she wakes up and she fastidiously stretches her body, no matter how she's feeling, no matter how much she doesn't want to crawl out of bed. And it's that rigor, that back to the fundamentals, basics, which allows her to be so expansive in her work. So it turns out that wonder and rigor are totally copacetic. They have an incredible feedback loop. And here's how I like to think about it, that wonder is found in the midst of rigor, and rigor cannot be sustained without wonder. Before I wrote the Creativity Leap, I actually developed a card game called the Wonder Rigor Discovery Deck. It's available on Amazon. And I made the card game really for my clients because I wanted to come up with helpful prompts and questions to help them identify when, where, and how to add in and build in more wonder or more rigor into their practice. So when I say that wonder is found in the midst of rigor, what do I mean by that? Well, have you ever been in the middle of a rigorous task like completing your taxes or finishing a lofty Excel sheet? And it's right there and then that a new idea emerges from your brain. That's what I mean when I say that wonder is found in the midst of rigor. And simultaneously, rigor can't be sustained without wonder. We can't churn and churn work and go from meeting to meeting to meeting and still expect to innovate. We have to pause. We have to be able to dream. We will not be able to sustain rigor if we do not design space and time for wonder. So as I conclude, I want to share with you some tactical techniques and tips for toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. And I came up with something I call the 3I creativity framework. The 3 I's are the ways that you can, on a consistent basis, toggle between wonder and rigor. And they are inquiry, improvisation, and intuition. And it doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter how much time you spend on one or the other. Just begin. And you'll see that they all are interdependent and interconnected, and they fundamentally lead to new insights. So, tip number 1, if you're trying to get better at inquiry and building curiosity, one of the things you can do organizationally is insist on creative abrasion teams. Now, creative abrasion is a term that was made up by Mr. Hirschbaum, who used to be the head of design for Nissan Automotive. Now, he understood that most people avoid collaboration like the plague, right? Because most people in organizations say, oh my gosh, why do we have to collaborate with this other team? We can do it so much faster by ourselves, right? But he understood that whatever design challenge his team was working on, he insisted people from manufacturing, sales, marketing, finance were part of the problem-solving process. Why? Because although there might be some abrasion, some friction at the beginning, he understood that we could convert friction into something positive. Why not convert it into something positive? So the process of building creatively abrasive teams has as its end game an incredibly positive outcome. Because if I come from finance and I'm working on a design challenge, I will ask totally different questions that will help to move the ball forward. And simultaneously, I will learn from the designers about a process that can inform my own work. Number 2, if you want to get better at improvising, 2 things you can do. On an organizational level, really start to embrace prototyping. Prototypes are rough draft, ugly mock-ups. In fact, the uglier, the better. I just got finished working with a law firm client, leading them through a series of design sprints where they were was facilitating their ability to get better at prototyping services and experiences and processes before you had all the budget, before you had all the ideas figured out. Because when you prototype services, experiences, for example, through pop-ups, that's one way you could do that. Simple doodles is another way you can prototype. You learn by doing. You get better at embracing mistakes. You are basically going about the work of improvisation, which is about being adaptive, which is about being emergent. Secondly, on an individual personal level, if you want to get better at improvisation, but also inquiry and intuition, Become a clumsy student of something. For example, I am currently a clumsy student of social ballroom dance. And it helps me to have an incredible sense of humor about myself. I'm improvising constantly. I learn to ask new and different questions of my classmates, of my instructors, and I have fun in the process. Remember, as we're talking about improvisation, that fundamentally plans are fiction. Now, I know that that might make some of you uncomfortable, but here's why plans are fiction. They haven't happened yet. Whether it's your to-do list in the morning or it's a budget, and I do a to-do list every single morning, but knowing that plans are fiction helps me to have a much more adaptive approach. And here's the excellent news. You actually improvise every day. In fact, I bet you can think of at least 2 ways you hacked your way through this morning before lunchtime to support a spouse, a partner, a client, a child, right? And I love this photograph. I'm from Philly, as I've already mentioned, and some of our communities where there aren't the best playgrounds for kids, they hack their play. So this is a basketball hoop that's made out of a punched out the bottom of a milk crate, and it's quite subversive. They hung it under a no ball playing sign, which I love. And finally, if you want to get better at the third eye of intuiting and intuition is a type of pattern recognition. It's that nudge that I should go left, not right, to work with this person, not that person. Begin to document the last 3 times you followed that nudge. What was the result? And then document the last 3 times you ignored your intuition. What was the result? I learned in my interviews with over 50 people for writing The Creativity Leap that to a successful leader, they incorporate intuition into strategic decision-making. So here are the 3 I's. Use them abundantly, use them consistently, and you will find yourself being able to toggle between wonder and rigor much more effortlessly. I want to conclude by just making the business case for creativity, because that's one of my pet peeves when people, even after all this evidence and explaining and models that I share with people about how valuable creativity is, they still might have their doubts. So let's just go through. Here's a question I like to pose. What if we linked our key performance indicators to creativity? And let me be very meta here and use a technique that I've been advocating. So let me prompt some questions. What if we looked at KPIs for people by asking the following questions to integrate creativity? Who do we hire? Why do we only hire from those sorts of places? How do we hire? What's our hiring process like? How do we connect internally? Do we have rituals? Do we need new and different rituals? How do we design teams? That's on the people dimension. On the process dimension, are we incentivizing for creativity? Do we tie it to performance review? How might we use creativity to reframe our business models, identify new strategic partners? Can we integrate technology, AR, VR to spark creativity? And what if we normalized prototyping? And then in terms of place, here's another way to think about integrating KPIs for creativity. How might we redesign the office or our homes? What are the benefits of all these blurred boundaries that we've been experiencing this past year and a half? But what are some new concerns? And what if sensorial design became a thing? So think about these new questions. I'm sure you can think of even far more questions that will help you to take creativity seriously in terms of KPIs. And finally, if you're still not convinced, here's the business ROI of creativity. When we are more creative, we necessarily have to have more inventive thinking, we must collaborate more, and we have to be customer obsessed. And when we have inventive thinking, we come up with novel business models, which lead to new strategic partnerships, and that lands us new revenue streams. That's a business impact. When we are more creative, we collaborate more. And when we collaborate more, our productivity increases, efficiencies improve, and when efficiencies go up, costs go down. That's a business impact. And finally, if we are more creative, it's not about us anymore. It's about the people we're serving. We become customer and client obsessed. And that leads us to build, and design. That leads us to build and design more human-centered products and services that will lead to an increase in market share, sales, and brand loyalty. I'm so sorry. I'd like to end by offering a gift. Excuse me. It's my Wonder Rigger tip sheet. And if you go to this link, which I've designed for the capture audience for today, if you go to bit.ly/WR capture and you download these 16 tips of integrating wonder and rigor, it has to happen today. I will randomly select, excuse me, one lucky winner to whom I will follow up with an email, and I will mail you a signed copy of the Creativity Leap. So go to this link, download your Wonder Rigger tip sheet, has to be today, and I will randomly select tomorrow morning one person who will receive a signed copy of the Creativity Leap. I want to end today by just sharing some wisdom from Albert Einstein to bring it full circle, who said that the important thing is to never stop questioning. So thank you so much. Going to end here, and I hope that you have an incredible rest of your conference.
Natalie, thank you so much. Heather, nobody can hear you. We're so excited to see your hand motions, though.
You'd think I'd learn after a year of doing Zoom meetings to turn off mute. Oh my gosh. Dr. Nixon, thank you so much. That was amazing. The thought of how wonder and rigor played together, so simple, but I've never heard it framed like that. Thank you for bringing that to the world.
I especially loved your idea of disrupting your thinking by bringing in people from other industries and that creative abrasion. I think for us this year in higher education, it's been such a trying year, and we've had to be creative in everything that we've done. And I never thought about bringing in people from other industries necessarily into those decisions. But, you know, as you talked about it, I saw examples of where we did. It was just never on my mind that we actually did it.
Absolutely. You know, Dr. Nixon, as you think about the work that you've done, the preparation for your book, what has been one of the most memorable moments of this process for you?
So one is the learning that I get to do every time I conduct an interview. I hear an additional perspective, and that helps me to expand the way I've been thinking about creativity. I also love the surprises of how I learn the ways that creativity shows up. I mean, one of the people I interviewed is a chocolatier in Omaha, Nebraska. I was out in Omaha speaking at a conference, and I was taking a walk through downtown Omaha. I'd never been. It was really cool. And Cher was actually playing in the convention center next door, and I'm a fangirl of Cher. So that was Omaha super cool for me. But I walked into this chocolatier's boutique, and it turns out she's also a beekeeper. And that took me all down this new path of understanding a new way of thinking about complexity and chaotic systems by just understanding the ways bees design their own living systems. So there's always new learning. But since the book has come out, I would say the biggest gift has just been when I get feedback that people's copies are dog-eared and highlighted, and that it's helping people who never before considered themselves to be creative to actually understand that the work that they do in law, in owning a beauty parlor, in parenting, whatever it is, to understand how incredibly creative their work is and to add new ways and techniques to be more creative.
It's fantastic. I can tell you right now, the book is on my list. I will be ordering it this afternoon. I also went to your link, and I'm going to download that rigor tip sheet and use that in the work that we do every day. Once again, Dr. Nixon, thank you so much for joining us. Lauren and I are going to take it off into the next piece. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, Lauren.
So exciting. What a great kickoff, right?
No kidding. Talk about starting off Innovate 2021 in a very exciting and thought-provoking way.
Absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot of examples of that creative thinking and living through that uncertainty over the next 2 days. And I'm really excited to hear from our peers and hear from those who have been out in the field doing the work.
Yes, for those of you who have joined us, welcome again to Innovate 2021. I can't believe it's been a year. And here we are, global, virtual, and engaging with the enrollment and marketing community in higher education. As Len mentioned, I am Heather Mueller, Vice President of Sales at Capture. I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Lauren Gold. You want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Lauren Gold, Director of Account Management here at Capture. We are so excited to be here today.
Absolutely. We have a couple of housekeeping things to remind you of. I've been watching on social media. I've been seeing you all posting. Keep reposting Capture posts, post original content from you. Just make sure you use the hashtag Innovate 2021 to enter into our wonderful, fabulous prizes that we'll be giving away throughout the conference. Everything from Amazon gift cards to Apple AirPods, and our ultimate drawing of a all access pass to masterclass. It's going to be amazing. We also will be giving away, as Len mentioned in his opening, 2 $500 scholarships to institutions who are participating in the conference today to help support access for students and their families to your institution. So we're really proud to be a part of all of it. One note, we are also, as Len mentioned, collecting donations during the conference to help support the Boys and Girls Club of America and the National Urban League. Both organizations are doing incredible work out there in the world, and we are really proud to support them as well. So go to capture.buzz, donate, hit that donate button. We will match up to $5,000 throughout the next 2 days. So please make sure that you hop in and support 2 wonderful organizations and the work that they're doing. Lauren, we've got a lot of things ahead of us.
I know. Should we go ahead and give something away?
Oh my gosh, yes. Let's totally do it.
Who's our
Oh my gosh. So the very first thing that we have to give away, an Apple gift card. Here we go.
Right? Amazon gift card.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Just in time.
Let me just promote Apple there for a moment. We have an Amazon gift card for $100. Drum roll, please. That was good. I'm assuming you all did it at home for me.
I can't do a drum roll.
Our winner of our first drawing is Emmanuel Cruz from the State University of New York College at Oswego. Congratulations, Emmanuel. Our team will be in touch to be able to connect you with your prize. Lauren, should we go ahead and move on to the next session?
I think so. I'm excited for this one. So our next session is called Building a Strong Inquiry Pool for Graduate Programs. And I know we have a ton of graduate program related attendees today, so I'm sure we're going to have a lot of people interested in this one. Just as a reminder, we'll be fielding questions from the group. So if you have questions for our presenters today, please post those and we will gladly pose them to the presenters at the end. Our presenters today are from Jacksonville University. We have Katie Jackson, Director of Creative and Digital Marketing, and Vinny Rodriguez is joining her. He's the Associate Director of Enrollment Operations. So we know that identifying prospective graduate students is more important than ever, but it's still one of the most elusive aspects of recruiting and enrolling these students. And in this session, Katie and Vinny are going to explain to us the multi-channel marketing strategies that Jacksonville's been using to identify prospective graduate students, both who are those in stealth mode and those who are actively seeking information. This presentation is also going to give us a lot of great tips on messaging these future graduate students in ways that will increase their conversion journey from inquiry to applicant and beyond. So welcome, Katie and Vinny. We are so excited to have you join us today.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hi, thanks for the warm introduction.
Absolutely. We'll let you guys take the floor. We're excited to learn from you guys today and hear what great things you've been able to accomplish this year.
Okay, let me get that shared screen going. And then we will take it away. And thanks everyone in the chat saying they're looking forward to this. Some nice encouragement. Okay, share screen, screen 2.
Lots of love for the grad population here.
Okay. Okay. Now I can't see anyone, but you guys can see my screen, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. So Vinny can let me know if anyone is commenting my name. All right, so thanks so much again for everyone having us. We're really excited to be here and talk to you today. As our great introduction, thank you guys for that. We're going to be talking about building a strong inquiry pool for graduate programs using multi-channel marketing. So we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more. My name is Katie Jackson Weber, and I'm the Director of Creative and Digital Marketing at Jacksonville University. I'm housed out of the Office of Marketing and Communications, but I work very closely with admissions and advancement, both on the undergrad and graduate side. And then I will let Vinny introduce himself.
I'm Vinny Rodriguez. My title is Associate Director of Enrollment Operations. That means that I am responsible for the teams of individuals that get all of the data into and out of our two admissions databases, one for undergrad, one for grad, as well as all of the documents and stamping things as official and the wonderful, wonderful minutia of enrollment operations.
So before we started this presentation and got into all of the details, I wanted to say one point that I think we all know, but sometimes forget, is the importance of marketing and admissions working together and working closely. The fact of me and Vinny being here today giving this presentation is a perfect example of that. So we started 4 years ago trying to integrate our teams as best as we could, and to the point of sometimes people will see me and think that I work in admissions, and I'm like, that is a victory, or they think I work in advancement. That's what we want. We want those lines to be blurred so that the greatest success can happen, like we're about to talk about. So a few ways that we found that's been helpful to do that is we started bi-weekly working sessions and strategic marketing meetings, and those happen both on the undergrad and the grad side. So they kind of flip back and forth, and the difference between those is the working ones are the people who are making all these materials we're going to talk about, and then the strategic ones are the people higher up, such as VPs and senior directors and directors, talking about the strategy behind these. And then we also started summer planning Fridays. I know that admissions, you never sleep. It's never not busy. We all can understand that. But the summers, it does slow down a little bit. Last summer, we didn't get that because of COVID, but we're getting that again this summer. So taking time on our calendar that's strategically marked out for 4 hours to really strategically plan admissions and marketing for grad during the summer. We try to keep open lines of communication through email, phone, text, Teams, you name it. And again, just that greatest success has happened for us since we established blurred lines. So at this point, I was going to let Vinny talk a little bit about how myself and him work together specifically.
Yeah, so the blurred lines is a great illustration for how we have sort of come to work together. Building the interpersonal dynamic, knowing enough about a person to know when's a good time to text or the best way to communicate. Katie and I have collaborated, just the two of us, on building out reports and figuring out how to best prove the value that we're creating for the university.
So, but also before we get into the multi-channel marketing, I wanted to do some level setting on ways that we've collaborated, what our goals as a team were, what our goals as our Capture were, some helpful context. And so we'll go through these next 2 slides, and then we'll start to get into the nuts of this presentation. So like everyone, we wanted to increase the quantity and quality of our applicant pool. Who doesn't want more applicants and better applicants? We also wanted to recruit for new programs. I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, but we were launching a lot of new programs, and we knew that was happening. We also wanted to start a partnership with Capture, and when we found them, our primary goal was retargeting leads on our website to create conversions, but Vinny's going to touch on some added benefits that came from working with them. But when we initially found them, it's because we wanted to capture people in the moment. So on our website, we wanted them to get that advertisement to pop up right then, or we wanted them to get the email in their inbox right at that moment that they're on our website versus 2 weeks later when we would serve it to them. So that's kind of why we started a partnership with them, in addition to all of the digital marketing efforts that we do. And then Vinny can touch on some of those added benefits that came that we didn't even know would come until we started working with them.
Right. So, and it was interesting. I was brought into the capture relationship establishment fairly late in the game, which is usually a point of stress for me. But it has been a thoroughly pleasant experience. One of my big themes is making the computers work for us. And so efficient data movement really means getting the information from one place to where it needs to be with as few manual steps as possible, right? Everyone hates downloading a file, dragging it over somewhere else, and then uploading it in whatever form it needs to be in. Being able to send information both ways, not just from Capture to our CRM, but from our CRM back to Capture, CRM, client relationship management system. So because we're able to send data back, again, very efficiently, we can use some of the data that we have in our CRM that Capture may not already have to target communications based on who the recruiter is, as well as using some of the intents and the behavioral and affinity analytics that Capture provides for our recruiters to prioritize who they should reach out to. You know, if someone is very much engaged on our website and Capture knows that, we can use those scores so that their call lists aren't just a laundry list of all of their leads, but shows people with intent. And finally, data visualization was a huge benefit. Our CRM has some reporting capabilities, but Capture is absolutely head and shoulders much better to look at. There's a great map where we can see where our leads are coming from. We can see at a glance how all of our different presentations are doing, how they're performing over time with line graphs, and it's a really great experience. For some helpful context about our experience with Capture, it was roughly a year ago, 18 months ago, we had a relationship with an online program manager that ended. And what that really meant for us and what they provided for us at the time was a lot of marketing and recruiting and working the application funnel on our behalf, as well as some of the educational support pieces. So what that meant for us really was we had to do all of that in-house now. We had to stand up a full admissions team for all of these previously online programs and handle our own lead generation and sourcing and nurturing, which is something that we hadn't done in this space before. We also opened a third location for graduate studies. We are currently over in Arlington, which is sort of the east side of Jacksonville, Florida. We opened a location roughly 4 years ago downtown to support some of our medical and our business cohorts. And now we're opening a third location in Palm Coast. So with the greater availability of cohorts, we definitely had to beef up the pipeline to support it.
And then the pandemic happened, and I know we're all sick of hearing that, but it's helpful context in this because we knew that we had a third location opening, and we knew that our relationship with our OPM was ending, but we didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. Luckily, we were already moving in a digital direction, so we just accelerated that even more. But we didn't slow down. We launched 6 new graduate and professional studies programs, and I'm proud to update that we're up by 67 graduate and professional studies deposits compared to this time last year. So we kept everything going even through this time. So now what you came for today, hopefully all of that context was helpful to get to this point in the presentation, multi-channel marketing. What does that look like for us and our graduate and professional studies audience? So some of the strategies that we use, Google search has been really successful for us in leads. We have been able to get really good quality leads from them. It's because people, they sit at home and they search best MBA programs in Florida, and we want to be top in mind. We don't want to be number 10 at the bottom because SEO can only do so much. Google display, we've been using them as well. We purchase these tactics in-house, but we purchase them through Google's self-service, and we use them to purchase leads and retargeting. So the display shows up in all of your Google networks, such as Gmail, when you're on Google's website, and the graduate and professional studies audience, we've seen really good results there as well. Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, this has been really successful for us to retarget throughout the funnel. So moving someone from a lead to an application or to a deposit. And I'll show in real life what that looks like after Vinny talks about some of the technology. At the end, I'm going to go through messaging and show you what this full cycle looks like for us. We've gotten creative about purchasing leads. So I know that most of you will know GRE, GMAT, we all purchase that, but thinking a little bit out of the box this year, having some extra travel funding that we didn't use and thinking, what about something like the Women in Aviation Society for our aviation program? And that's been really successful for us because those leads aren't being used as much as GRE and GMAT that we all purchase. So I just challenge you to be creative about where you're getting leads from. We have not been as successful on the graduate and professional studies with TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. It hasn't gotten us a good ROI. I would be interested to hear, and I won't be able to see that chat until after, but if that has been different for anyone else, seen great on the undergrad side. TikTok has been wonderful for us on the undergrad side this last year to promote visits, but hasn't helped us as much on the graduate side. So we've pulled away from that. We started the relationship with Capture because we noticed that what was happening is we were getting a lot of really good leads. We had come in and we had worked hard and we had, as we've alluded to, the Google, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we had all these leads, but they weren't moving through the funnel like we wanted them to do. And we were doing all the traditional recruitment and marketing things that you all here probably do today, like making phone calls and emails, but we still weren't seeing that threshold move over. So that's why we started talking to Capture. And for those of you who aren't familiar with their product, part of their product allows you to serve ads directly on your website while someone's on there. So they can be on there looking at an MBA program. And if they look at it so many times, they're going to get a form that's going to ask them to fill out an RFI. Another example is how Vinny sets up, which he'll talk about later, where the CRM is talking to Capture. If someone is in our lead database and then they go back to the website, and let's say we knew they applied, but they haven't finished their application, they just started it. So we worked with Vinny and Capture to set up an email that when they were on our website, if they had started an application but not finished it, they would get an email right then. So we know they're thinking about our program at that moment, not at 6 p.m. when the dog's barking and the kid's yelling. No, 12 p.m. at lunch when I'm thinking about finishing my application, I get the email that says, we know you started it, why wait, do it now. So for us, that has been 333 emails so far, and we've had 60 deposits from emails that were opened and 23 deposits from emails that were clicked. Vinny's going to talk about technology and tracking on the next slide, but before he did that, I wanted to talk about the marketing side of that. So we had to get on board with Google URL Builder. UTM, if you don't know what it is, Vinny will briefly touch on it, but I highly suggest going to Google's website. There's lots of free tutorials on it, understanding the importance of Google UTM and the tracking that it allows you to do. And that has been a game changer for us. The ability to track not only ROI, but move people and do these things like we're talking about doing is because of that. And so I've included a link here for you on that. Google Analytics and dashboards. In the last 2 years, we've been working more out of Google Analytics, and we haven't been as happy about how visually that looks. It's not up to the caliber as like what you would see in Capture. So we are starting to build Google dashboards, and I've included a link for you on that as well. It's a great tutorial, and it allows you to just visually show really nice the ROI and see those areas that need improvement that you need to work on. So now I will turn it over to Vinny for a little bit.
So Katie and her team are great at the what and the why. I and my operations folks get the pleasure of working out the how. So here we go. The first drop in that bucket has to be UTM. UTM stands for the Urchin Tracking Module. It is effectively a SWOT analysis for what's working and what's not. So in any given link in an ad or a promotional email, you can add certain terms to the end of the URL to the web address to indicate what source, where they came from, whether that was from an email from our CRM, or if that was from Capture, if that was from a Google ad. What was the medium? Was it an email? Was it a text message you sent? Was it, again, a social media lead? What terms were used? What was the buzzword that really captured their attention? What's the overall content, the main idea of the ad or the mailing? And then what's the campaign? What's the overall effort that really captured this lead? So using those 5 data points on the way back in through Capture and through our CRM, we're able to really see what's working, what's not, what we can improve, and what we really need to capitalize on to build the rest of our funnel. You'll hear me talk a lot about data because that's the world that I live in. You have to have clean data and clean system management across all of the databases you're interacting with. So what that really looked like for us was a lot of collaboration between me and our representatives at Capture to make sure that fields, that the visual term, the columns in the spreadsheet all align, and that there's definitions that are shared back and forth. So that what we're pulling in is accurate to what they're sending, and then what we're sending back is interpreted correctly on the Capture side. That transparency is absolutely key. Things get lost in translation all the time, and relating databases is absolutely important for having clean data. One particular data point that has really been the linchpin in all of our efforts is a unique identifier, a shared unique identifier between Capture and our CRM. So what that allows us to do is when a lead passes through Capture, when somebody visits our website and it's anonymous user number 875 and they fill out a form, well, that form then gets sent over to our CRM, and a unique identifier, their CRM ID, gets created. So in the data we share back to Capture, we're including that unique identifier. That way, any further visits from the same device or from the same physical location can be attributed to that individual in our CRM. And through that shared unique identifier and through how Capture works in tracking web activity and also intent, we're able to look at that in an incredibly granular way and find meaning and value in our marketing efforts. Our CRM is Slate from Technolutions. It's fairly fully featured, and one of their reporting tools we use is called Ping. If you would go to the next one for me. So Ping is Slate's built-in sort of web tracking script, similar to what Capture provides, though not nearly in the same terms. The reporting is not as pretty, but using Slate and using Ping to track some of the UTM and some of the Capture activity, Katie and I are able to work together to build reports and to build tools for our recruiters and for her marketing folks to see, again, what's working, what's not, what we need to improve, what we need to capitalize on. Capture's tracking and reporting has been really helpful for us. So part of the data we're feeding back is where they are in the funnel, whether it's a prospect or an inquiry, or if they've applied or they've paid their deposit, or if they are enrolled and currently a student. So if we pull up any given record, we can see where that individual is in the funnel. We can also see any campaigns we're currently running and a count of how many people have interacted with that campaign and where they are in the funnel. So we can see if an ad is really speaking to our deposited students. Maybe we want to try to shift the call to action a little bit. We can see their physical location. I talked about it in data visualization a minute ago. Having a world map of where we're getting leads from is really, really surprisingly helpful. We had a really interesting instance where we had a lot of applications from one specific region in Southern Africa, and through Capture we were able to really quickly figure out where that was and act on it. Again, capturing ad performance through UTM and through Ping is absolutely incredible. Using Capture and using Slate, because what we all are doing right in operations and in marketing is showing how much value we bring through our efforts. Automation in the CRM is also imperative. We all only have 40 or 50 hours in a given work week, and the less of that time we can spend manually moving files, the better we can utilize our own creativity and our own efforts. So what Capture was able to do is generate a file that would send over to Slate's storage server, and then Slate can generate the file that goes back and push it over to Capture that way. All of this happens nightly, and no one on my team really has to do anything for it to happen. Making the computers work for us is sort of the mantra that I live by. And then that bidirectional feed is informing messaging. And I think Katie's going to talk a bit more in a few minutes about how exactly we are using the data coming back in to more surgically target our messages to each of these individuals.
Thanks, Benny. So if you've been watching this is probably the part of the presentation that you were really excited about. So we're going to talk about how all of this back end comes to life and show some of the pretty goodies. Okay, so custom messaging using real-time data has been changing for us and allowed us to have that success of being up by so many deposits. We've also had to change our outlook of the conversion journey from inquiry to applicant to beyond. I know most of us are always thinking about, okay, got to get my inquiry, got to get my application, got to get them to deposit. But sometimes we don't think about getting them to show up that day, and that kind of stops. So we've changed our marketing to think about the entire pool and not stopping until they show up and we've handed them off to a professor, basically. We also launched a FAST application that I'm going to talk about a little bit. And I've included a link for you here. The FAST application is this whole idea of filling out an application in 5 minutes or less, and you're pre-qualified. And then we follow up for other materials. So it takes you 5 minutes, and within 48 hours, we tell you if you're pre-qualified for our program or not. It doesn't mean that you're in. It just means that you could be a good fit. And we've seen a lot of good started applications come from that, and that's been really successful for us. It hasn't worked for programs that require more materials, like some of our nursing programs, not a good fit. You need a license, but things like our MBA program where the requirements are much slimmer, like bachelor's degree, GPA of this, and we were able to fit that in a form, and it's been really successful for us. Virtual chat, we all know about virtual chats, but we leaned into virtual chats even more. We started doing those at the beginning of COVID, but leaned heavier into them, these one-on-one experiences. Jacksonville University sells a small program experience. And so it's giving those people that experience at the front end and not just when they get to their classes. We sell the 11-to-1 teacher ratio. So it's that whole idea of, okay, my admission recruiter is going to meet with me one-on-one versus just a virtual information session. 1-year programs, that was another messaging that worked really well for us and that we pivoted into. We noticed that there was a pool of people who didn't know what they wanted to do. They just know that they wanted to go back to school and that they wanted to seize this opportunity and that life has happened during COVID and this is a great opportunity to start a new career. And they weren't sure what they wanted that to be in, but they knew they wanted to do it as fast and as economical as possible. And 1 year allows them to do that. So we've started advertising, here are all the programs that you can complete in 1 year. We also started thinking about Instagram takeovers for a grad audience, which is something we used to only do on the undergrad side. And I was always like, no, that's not grad. But COVID put me in a position where I thought, well, we might as well try. And we have seen phenomenal success. I'm sure everyone makes the jokes about the moms are taking over Instagram. It must be happening because it's been really, really successful having a current student or admission recruiter or alum. We've seen better success with current students and alums and admission recruiters dropping on for the day. We send out a text message at the beginning, say, hey, we're going to be on there. Come get all your questions answered. And that experience of hearing what a real student or alum had has been really helpful for people. We also record them and put it together in a quick email and send it to everyone. So if they don't have Instagram, every lead in the funnel gets it for that particular program because we do them by program. So here's a few examples of what this looks like when it comes together. So on the left is our JU FAST application, and we've received 96 applications since we've launched this. And that's kind of what that 5 minutes to apply, 2 days to receive a decision, 1 year to earn a master's degree. And then we have the unofficial pre-qualifier type language in there. On the right, you're going to see the virtual information session recordings link. So we all do virtual information sessions, but we noticed in some data that a lot of people were registering but not attending. But even though they weren't attending, they were still depositing at really good rates. So it was getting over the fact of they just want the recording. So we started this campaign of get a recording anytime, any place. You don't have to schedule, fits in wherever you want. And we've actually got 303 leads from this. So it's been really successful for us.
Yeah. If I could hop in, one of the most successful points I think of all of our messaging, and that Katie and her team has done a really good job, is all of our messaging has a really clear call to action. What is it that we want the individual to do at this part of the journey? Do we want them to start an application? Do we want them to register for a virtual event? Do we want them to start a fast app? It's always really clearly designated, usually at the top of the email with a big button. And I think that's been a very large part of growing our grad funnel.
Thanks, Benny. So the end of this presentation is I'm just going to walk through what this looks like when all of these pieces come together. And I've broke it into two areas. I've broken it into getting a leader prospect and then getting that leader prospect to move into an application and then completing their application. So let's pretend that, well, before I start this, I do want to give one disclaimer. When we sit down and we talk about these scenarios, it doesn't always work this way. Sometimes they find us in Facebook, or sometimes they find us through a recruiter, but then they get retargeted by these marketing. But this is what we mapped out for the year, and this is what we're expecting to happen, knowing that people are going to fall in at different times. So my friend, she's looking for my imaginary friend here for this scenario. She's looking for an MBA program. So she searches best MBA programs in Florida. And then we come up because of our ranking in CEO magazine and buying a Google search ad. So she clicks on it, she sees it, she thinks about it, and then her kid is crying in the back and she's like, maybe now's not the time. So then she started a Facebook advertisement about our one-year programs and thinks to herself when she's laying in bed and sees that advertisement pop up on her phone, okay, I could do this a year, anybody can do anything for a year and change their life. So the moment goes away in her head, she goes to sleep, the day goes on, and she's in the next day. So the next day around lunch, she thinks about this again. She's on lunch break at her work, and she visits JU's website for MBA program and thinks, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? I'm still contemplating. And now she's going to see a PID form from Capture pop up that's on the screen that says, are you interested in learning more about earning a graduate degree or professional certificate? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll send you some information. So she fills this out. And currently we've had 841 forms, which is a great amount of organic leads. Very happy about that. And she's going to receive an email communication from Slate through Jacksonville University that asks her to attend a virtual information session. So she signs up for the information session and she has all intentions of coming. But then her kid has a baseball game. So she forgets about that, moves on with her life, and JU is kind of out of her mind at the moment. But then she's going to receive a storytelling advertisement on Facebook, Instagram, and a drip campaign about the benefits of one-year programs, the advising that you get, the course curriculum, the return on investment. And at the end of that, she's also going to receive an invite to a virtual chat with the recruiter for that program. And she attended, which is a win. So she attended it. She was really excited there. The recruiter showed them how to start her application. She goes home, she starts her application after her virtual chat, and then life happens again. Kind of goes in the back burner, and 2 weeks go by, and she's been really busy and hasn't thought about the program anymore. But then a big life event happens, and she really needs to get her master's now. Work has stepped in and said, you need a master's degree to be able to get a promotion. So she goes to JU's website and she's like, okay, I need to finish my application. This is the time, but is this the right time? I don't know, but I really want that raise. And so then she's going to get an email because Capture and Slate know that she's on our website. She's going to get an email to her email that's going to say, why wait? Now's the time. Let's do this. Finish your application. She finishes her application. Then she goes into our standard phone calls from recruiters, emails, texts, digital ads to try to get her to deposit. And then she comes to Jacksonville University. So that's just an example of how it all plays out. And we will be happy to answer any of the questions that you have. And now I can answer the chat as well, since I was.
Lots of chats coming through. Katie and Benny. Everybody had so much to say. Thank you guys so much. I have so many questions. I feel like I should hold back because I can ask them to you at another time. I will go ahead and ask you a couple that popped up from the group, but I did have one just clarifying question to ask you guys before we start, because I think it kind of fields some of the questions. How many programs, individual graduate programs, do you support with your marketing efforts?
That's a big number.
Big number, right? So how do you decide how to divide up between general grad promotions versus program specific?
Okay, so I can go ahead, Benny. You go first.
So there's sort of a logical grouping that we use. So we've got obviously the general graduate form that we use that lists all of our graduate majors, and then we've got, you know, almost by college, where we can take most business ads will speak to most business masters seeking students. A lot of our applied health sciences we can use to communicate to that whole group. So we sort of group them by school or by college, and then the general grad population.
And my one other question, because I get asked this all the time with my partners, we always have a couple of program leaders who push their program to the top of the priority list. How do you guys use the data that you're collecting to help you show where you should be putting your marketing dollars?
So I think that's been a two-part thing for us. One, data is important, but two, understanding from leadership priorities. So we all know people are going to be loud, and that's good because that's their baby. But that's why we've started those strategic meetings with admissions and marketing. And that's us going through the numbers and saying, okay, well, this program can handle 10 people. They're currently at 9 deposits. We only need 1 more. Well, maybe we don't need to spend as much money on there, versus this program can handle 50 people and they're only at 20. Or this program brings in this much revenue. So we have those conversations. The second thing is we've started monthly meetings with our program managers as well, just to show them that we're giving them attention. And that has been extremely, extremely helpful, because people want to know that you're giving them that attention, and that one-on-one with a program manager and talking through what's already happened. Most of the time, they don't know that we're already doing all this marketing and then they have 9 deposits and that they don't need to be loud. That's exciting.
Heather, you want to ask some of the questions that came through in our chat?
So we've got, I'm telling you, your session put the chat on fire. So we've got from Andy Morris. The question is, in the RFI, you capture phone, but I didn't see a positive opt-in for texting. When do you ask for that opt-in?
So in our internal RFIs, we have a positive opt-in. Our guidance from our internal offices is to treat them giving us their phone number as a positive opt-in until otherwise indicated.
Good to know. Another question was asked, how much retargeting do you do to your current or former students at the undergrad level? Because we know that they have a lot of brand recognition there.
Yeah, so I think before COVID, that wasn't a big thing for us because we depended a lot on recruiters going to classrooms, and then that stopped happening. So we started doing a lot of that. We even geofenced graduation this year that was outside about all the programs you could do in a year. And we got, I mean, probably like 150 clicks in an hour. It was really, really exciting. And then the other thing is these one-year programs, we've launched what we call grad to grad. So if a student is being highly successful, we're encouraging professors to talk to them about it and say, have you thought about enrolling in this program? You're going to be able to get your bachelor's and your master's in 5 years. I think you would be a good fit. You're doing really good in your classes. You should think about applying.
Yeah, I think another facet of multi-channel marketing is sort of getting out of the marketing world. When we think of marketing, we talk about emails and text messages and ads, but some of the internal conversations we're having, and part of blurring the lines between marketing and admissions and even grad and undergrad is, if we have folks in our BSN, our Bachelor of Science in Nursing courses, or in our RN to BSN program, at what point does it make sense for us to start talking to them as advisors, as recruiters, about the master's in nursing, about the doctorate in nursing, to figure out where their career goals are and how we can help them achieve them here, JU?
Absolutely. I have one question for the two of you, because you play such different roles, and you gave some really great background of what led you to here, right? As you think about the last year or so of bringing on this type of data, these types of interactions into your day-to-day world and into your operations, what would you share with folks who are thinking about it, the greatest thing that you have learned?
I would say the importance of data. I have a student worker team, and I feel like a lot of people get into marketing because they don't want to do math, and you're going to do math. And data can inform messaging. Data can do so much. I would also say not getting overwhelmed by the data. There's times that Vinny doesn't feel this way because he's in data all the time, but I am just like, this is so much data. What do I do with this? So taking a step back and understanding, okay, this is what I need to look. I need to look at the messaging. I need to look at the clicks, and this other stuff isn't as important at this moment.
That's great. Thanks, Katie.
So, couple of things there. One, I think it's funny that my response is completely the opposite of Katie. I think the relationships, because I live in data world and look at a spreadsheet and find meaning. Building the relationships between operations and marketing has been absolutely key. Katie having my cell number to say, hey, I'm looking for this field, or I need this data for this report, or to figure out what we're doing here, is so important to how the offices interact with each other, that it from an operations perspective can't be overstated. And then to speak to the data, you wouldn't believe the data that I throw out without ever pulling into the CRM, because it's not actionable, it's not important.
Agreed. Most beautiful words I've ever heard. That data, if it's not actionable, it's not worth it. Somebody post that out in the social media channels. That's fantastic. Oh my gosh. Vinny, Katie, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, sharing some amazing content with the crew. Lauren and I have some housekeeping to do before the next session, so we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys.
Thank you too. Lauren, I think
I'm going to give something
another giveaway.
Yeah, this time it's going to be a set of Apple AirPods.
Oh my gosh. Let's get the virtual drum roll rolling.
It's your turn.
That's right.
No, here we go. Lamari Rivera from Fitchburg State University. Congratulations, a pair of Apple AirPods. I'm jealous.
Congrats, Amari. And Lauren, remind the crew what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got at least one more giveaway that we're going to be doing today. Yeah. All you have to do, go on LinkedIn, find one of our capture posts, share it out with your crew, your connections, and just make sure you include the hashtag Innovate 2021 in there. I've been looking throughout the day. There's been lots and lots of action on there. I'm really excited to see everybody putting in their favorite comments from the day and sharing out different things from Natalie Nixon this morning. It's been really fun. We also have, just as a reminder, don't forget that we have our donations live for the Boys and Girls Club of America and the National Urban League. If you want to donate to those, and don't forget that we will be doing a match of up to $5,000 on there. So we are very excited to see how that progresses throughout the day.
Absolutely. As you are participating virtually in your home office, in your work office, wherever you might be, don't be shy, hop into chat, drop ideas, drop questions. Our presenters are always super excited to be able to mind meld with you, right, during their sessions. So Lauren, we have a really very interesting session coming up, and I'm pumped to be able to bring them to the table. So our next session is a joint effort by Capture in our Partner in Innovation platform Q Education. We have two presenters, the first of which is Gil Rogers. Now, if any of you saw the posts on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, Gil was worried about the potential of poking at him during his session. Heckling, I think, was the term that he used. So I'm going to do my best not to do that anymore. But Gil is here. He's the Executive Vice President of Marketing at Platform Q Education. And Ann Freihofer, our very own Senior Enrollment Solutions Consultant, will share stories about our partners in common who are maximizing virtual engagement tools to identify, convert, and enroll more students using Engage and Platform Q's Conduit together. So let's find out about how training behavioral intelligence and continuous content has led to increased student enrollment at these institutions. Gil, Ann, hey!
Hey!
Hi! Everybody. I'm super pumped for your session.
I appreciate it. And thank you all for having me on your virtual stage. I appreciate it. I will say that I've been in this space for over 10 years. Ann has been in this space for over 10 years, and we have never had the opportunity to present at a conference together. We've been to more baseball games together than we've presented at conferences together. So we'll try to catch up, but maybe we'll keep the baseball games ahead by one consistently. So we'll work on that as we go.
I mean,
It's a
but
lot
yeah,
easier to be
if
together.
it took having our own conference to make it happen, then
Boom.
here we are.
There we go. Enroll more, catch more foul balls. It's all the same thing. So we'll do some quick introductions. Heather, thank you for not heckling me throughout the time. My name is Gil Rogers. I'm the Executive Vice President at Platform Q Education. We are the developers of the Conduit platform. I've been at Platform Q for about 3 years. Prior to here, I've been in the ed tech space for a while. I was at Chegg Enrollment Services doing their digital marketing, demand gen work, those sorts of things. Been in the recruitment space. Prior to that, I was at University of New Haven and University of Hartford in Connecticut on the enrollment and the marketing side. And so I'm excited to be here today to talk about how we're having these software platforms work together to support our partners better. So Anne, quick introduction.
Yes, Anne Freihofer. Marketing graces me with senior enrollment, regional solutions consultant, very flattering, and at Capture, working in sales, helping connect great institutions all over the country with some of the fantastic research work, behavioral intelligence, all the things that we do. So I'll be celebrating 9 years with Capture in July, which is wild. I can't believe it. It's been 9 glorious years. And the evolution, how things have changed. And I'm really excited, Gil. I think that there's a lot of really cool stuff that we've had the privy of seeing in our partners as they've started to experiment with the way that Conduit and Engage can bring some of that underneath the radar, data, technology, behavior to the surface to truly enroll more students. So I would say, in the essence of time, knowing how long-winded you and I can be, let's just do it.
Actually, we're done. Open for questions.
Oh,
great. No.
Q&A?
There we go. So before we hop into anything about about some examples and those sorts of things, I want to level us up a little bit and talk about and think about the world outside of higher education for a moment. Because I think one of the things that we forget to do is consider those things when we're putting together our enrollment plans and marketing plans, right? I think there's a hook outside of our office where we hang our outside of work life experiences on sometimes when we build some of our plans. And I think what's happened over the past year and a half is that hook has started to disappear, and we're starting to really understand that students are consumers. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So the first thing I'll kind of speak to here is really when we think about tools that consumers use when we are shopping, comparing, researching, right? When I'm looking for a house or a place to rent or whatnot, I might use a tool like Zillow to do that, because I can shop, compare, evaluate things side by side. Same thing with a tool like TripAdvisor. I can use that to look at destinations, compare things by price. I might use Amazon for a lot of my shopping needs. And why is Amazon so great? Because Amazon helps me with recommendations for other things I should get, or when I come back, recommendations on things I should buy because of my past behavior, right? Over the past year and a half or so, another thing that has evolved, and we've seen a lot of evolution in, is media consumption by ourselves and the students that we work with in our day jobs, right? And so when earlier, years ago, it was, I hate my cable plan because I have a bunch of channels I have that I don't watch that I have to pay for. And so streaming platforms started to really proliferate because of that, the opportunity for lower cost and choice, right, and access to content. So Netflix came aboard. New platforms like HBO Max and Disney Plus have started to splinter off. And the reason for that is, when you think about Disney Plus, does Disney Plus want to license its content to other platforms, or does it want to own the experience, and then more importantly, own the data on the engagement with that experience and be able to really tailor content for the audience in real time, right? And so, and the final piece of this, speaking of tailoring content, is particularly in the business world, our ability to scale engagement has evolved. CRM platforms have completely transformed the way that we are able to develop reporting, analytics, be able to automate communications and reporting. And platforms like Marketo and HubSpot, these types of platforms allow for tailored marketing and communication. And I know, Anne, one of the things that we've talked about, pretty consistently is the lessons, particularly in some of these areas, that can be applied into the enrollment space and what you've seen over the past 9 years or so. So I'd love to turn it over to you to share some of your insights.
Sure. In the 9 years that I've been reaching out and having these fascinating conversations with institutions, regardless of the style of institution, regardless of the time of year, pre-COVID, post-COVID, doesn't necessarily matter. 4 common themes. We need more content. We need more to measure and make content more personalized. We have fewer resources. We don't have enough time. So I think an area in which all of us are really created equal is in this need, these challenges that we face and all of these needs that we have to be able to be personalized and do it to scale. I worry sometimes, and one of the things that we hear a lot about is more content. We need an increase in more content. We need more of the right content. We need more relevant content. We need more content that meets students and their families and their influencers where they are, so that we can truly identify, convert, and enroll more of the right type of student for our institutions. So across the board, regardless of the time of year, regardless of what's going on in the world, I feel like these are 4 really common themes. So I would encourage all of our institutions that are joining us today to think about, when they're increasing content, are they increasing content in a way in which it's valuable? It can be measured, measure those interactions. I mean, imagine a world in which, as a consumer, we are not utilizing, or the organizations that are communicating with us, the Zillows, the Amazons of the world, are sending us content that doesn't resonate. We have to think about our students and their families and their influencers in the same way that we experience these things. So how do we do more with less? How do we do it year after year after year? I think in this next slide, we're going to talk a lot about the evolution of these tactics. And I think regardless of what chair you sit in, we have 4 common challenges constantly. If there's a challenge that you're experiencing, by all means, put it in the chat. We'd love to hear what else is on your minds, what's keeping you awake at night. But I would say across the board, we need more. We need it personal. We have less time. We have fewer resources to do it. So how can we possibly do this to scale in the future? Go.
Yeah, and I think one of those things is, if you don't interact, or if you don't have any of those 4 challenges, I'd love to hear that too, and what you're doing. Share some of your secret sauce. I think, we there's plenty to go around. And so yeah, on that same vein, I think, as I agree with you 100%. It's not always about more content. It's about more of the right content, and the right content at the right time via the right communication channel, which is a lot of rights to get right. And so I'm trying to have the captioning say right as many times as possible. That's what I'm trying to do right now. So so when we think about the evolution of recruitment tactics, one of the things that I think we all understand is that in higher ed and enrollment marketing, we don't necessarily ever retire a lot of things, right? Sure, we don't have MySpace pages anymore, and if you still do, put the link in the chat. But there are some things that we just continue to do, even when we add new things, right? And so, sending out mailers didn't replace in-person visits and in-person experiences. Doing advertising didn't replace sending out mailers. Sending text messages didn't replace emails, right? We find ways to incorporate new tactics into our fold as we identify them as effective. And I think one of the things that's happened over the past year and a half is what was going to happen over a 10-year process happened over a 10-month process, with incorporating things like webcasting, streaming, live chat tools into these experiences. And as we exit the pandemic, what we're going to see is a more hybrid approach to our recruitment processes. We're not going to, pre-pandemic, it was, virtual events aren't going to replace an in-person experience. And no one is going to argue that, I think. And I think we've seen over time that virtual insert whatever here doesn't replace the in-person insert whatever here, right? It's all about creating content and creating experiences that supplement and support each other. Having the right amount of storytelling, having the right amount of resources, at the right time for students, again, via the right channels. And so, I think, we never really do away with things per se. We always find ways to fold them in. And I think the pressure is going to be in the future, how do we do that the right way?
Totally agree. I would imagine very similarly to the conversations that we're having, you're hearing a lot of, we need to do everything that we were doing in 2019, and we need to do everything that we were doing in 2020, and we need to do it better in 2021 and beyond, because we're all reading the witchy data. We all understand the demographics that we're up against. So I love this slide because I don't necessarily think it's a It's an or, it's an and. We don't choose to stop doing things. We choose to do things in combination with others. What I would encourage all of the individuals that are joining us today is to have conversations surrounding how can we figure out the right recipe. If you think about baking a cake, there's all sorts of things that are critically important regardless of what style or what you're building. In this case, what we would encourage everybody to do is think about how you can leverage print mail, direct mail, campus visits, college fairs, all of that in conjunction with each other. How better to do that than by measuring the actual interventions, those engagements with students? So there's a lot of buzzwords that I think in some ways are intimidating to higher ed. The ability to really fold in things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, marketing automation, behavioral analytics. We hear those words out in the world. How do we apply them? How do we figure out how behavioral analytics can inform our traditional marketing tactics? So we've got plenty of data, and I'm sure you do as well, surrounding the effectiveness of individual interventions at just the right time. So what I think is really important and a key in this moment is not necessarily to sunset it or retire a specific tactic, but to think about the purpose of that tactic and to measure whether or not the conversion of those students and their families is helping you reach your long-term enrollment goal. When we were all sidelined by the pandemic, I love getting direct mail. I think that there's a great purpose for direct mail. I'm never going to be away from my phone, so I've got to be digitally targeted as well. So I think the real challenge for our partners and our prospective partners in the future is going to be, how do we do all of this, do it to scale, do it well, and innovate every single year to make sure that we're really in the right place. So I think the power of the relationship between Conduit and Engage gives us the ability to say, if students want to experience you from a distance, fantastic. You should make that content available in real time where they are. Let's make sure we're measuring it. Let's make sure that we're triggering it when necessary and really making sure that it is unique to the individual student journey.
Yeah, and I like how you snuck Innovate into that when you mentioned the title of the movie. That's a win. Good job.
Yes.
The other, you know, I love all those points, and I agree 100%. I feel like one of the things that we've always heard over the past, we'll say 8 years prior to the past year, is, well, we can't add X, Y, and Z because our budget is spent on travel, it's spent on the print pieces, it's spent on these sorts of things. And so over the past year, we've had to do a lot of those things that we were always skeptical of, or had to have 10 case studies for, or had to have data on to be able to do. And so my challenge to everyone would be is, as we exit the pandemic, let's look at those legacy tactics with that same lens of needing to evaluate the outcomes and look at how they actually support our outcomes. Because the reality is most of us don't miss college fairs per se. We miss going to the college fair, talking to our friends on either side about how bad the college fair is, right? And so we miss interpersonal connections in a lot of spaces. That's not to say all college fairs are bad. It's that you have the data to be able to determine which college fairs are good, right? And so I think we being more thoughtful about that approach. Does that mean maybe some of us have less hotel points at the end of the recruitment cycle? Maybe, but it makes those in-person experiences that much more impactful for our audiences, right? And so I think one of the, as we kind of shift back, into that mindset, and you mentioned earlier that students are consumers too. I think what we need to think about is how students use consumer tools, consume media, and the tools that we can use to better engage our audience and better analyze that data, right? And so we mentioned before about Zillow and Amazon as ways that that we use tools to evaluate and buy products. Students use tools to evaluate and choose schools. There are tools out there like Plexus or Niche or CapEx that allow students to find, shop, and compare these institutions side by side. I worked in that space for 10 years, right? There's a lot of opportunities for that process to be democratized and make it a lot more accessible for students to be able to compare and shop for schools that way, right? And on the consumption side, like we use Disney Plus or Hulu to consume content. Students consume college content using platforms like Zoom and WebEx for meetings, and Conduit for on-demand content and streaming and live events. And on top of this, there's the machine learning and analytics side. Of course, CRM platforms like Salesforce and Slate and others are going to provide that opportunity for automating of reporting and generating of reports and engagement and communications. But you need additional resources like the behavioral intelligence platform and the Engage module with Capture to be able to support that continuous engagement and the use of the content and the analysis of the impact of that content. And Anne, I know you have a lot of thoughts on the combination of the Capture and the Conduit piece here.
Sure. I think that the challenge that we're all going to face, and again, a conversation we have all the time, is, my goodness, look at all of these different places where we're driving students and their families. We're driving individuals to research us and learn about us, and then we're encouraging them to experience content, and we need to figure out a way to centralize all of this data and make it meaningful. I was on campus for the first time in a year and a half with a partner yesterday, and one of the most meaningful questions that I heard in the entire conversation was, how are we using this data to adjust strategy? So not just what are we doing and what are we seeing, but as we are seeing the results come in from these experiences, where students and their families are researching about our institutions, how they're experiencing our content, whether it's through Conduit or Zoom, and then what we're doing with that data and the way that we are then furthering our personal communications. Although that question sounds rather obvious, I think it's a really brave thing to ask yourselves. What are we doing with all of this rich data now that we have it? Because if we're not doing anything with it, I think about the conversation we just had with Jacksonville. It's got to be actionable. It's got to be meaningful. Students and their families and their influencers are telling us exactly what they need from us. We just might not have the mechanisms in place to be able to socially hear them or to listen to that behavior. So as students and their families are communicating with you what they're interested in, equally as important, what they're not interested in, sometimes a non-response is in fact a very obvious response. We need to adjust. We need to stop doing something that's not working. So when I look at the relationships and when I look at these consumer media and consumption tools and how they're feeding platforms like the behavioral intelligence platform through Capture, Slate, Salesforce, all of these fantastically dynamic tools, let's make sure we're asking ourselves, is it working? Are we driving results? Are we able to actually say, as a function of that, we enrolled more? If so, let's do more of it. If not, let's be brave enough to say, let's change, let's adjust, let's try something different. So I just love the way that these tools are able to play together in our relationships. And I think the story that the data will continue to tell us is going to be monumental.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to be cognizant of time for us, Gil. I know that we've only got about 15 more minutes and we tried really hard.
We'll get there, or Heather will get the hook, either way. So, as we've gone through the past year and a half, I think what's happened is a spectrum has emerged when it comes specifically to virtual engagement or online engagement, right? And that is that, on one end of the spectrum, we have, the pre-produced content. These are our virtual tours, our virtual view books. A lot of these existed pre-pandemic. They're very on the shelf. They're set it and forget it. And that's easy for us, right? From a process perspective, once it's up, it's there, it's accessible, great, check out our virtual tour. The unfortunate part about that is there's research that shows that virtual tours don't really move the needle from an enrollment plan alone, right? There needs to be more engagement. There needs to be more facilitation of content that becomes more personalized, right? And so what's the other end of the spectrum from this? It's being live all the time, right? And this is where everyone hops to Zoom meetings back-to-back for high school visits, or WebEx, or using SlateShare, or those sorts of pieces. And this live all the time element is something that we thought that students wanted. And what we learned, especially with things like virtual college fairs and back-to-back school visits on Zoom, is that not all the time, right? And again, it's just like a regular high school visit, just like a college fair. Maybe there's moments of brilliance where you have great engagement, but it's kind of like when I go golfing, right? I have one shot that's good for each type of a shot, but other than that, I'm not really that good at golf, right? And so there's that aspect of this element, but golf is still a lot more fun. Well, but that's a whole nother story. So what this means is that there's this wide spectrum in the middle that is, a need for a combination of live, pre-recorded, and on-demand content. Now, of course, we have the Conduit logo up there because Conduit does support the facilitation of all these things. But more importantly, it's the strategy around when do we want to be live, when do we want to release pre-recorded content, and when do we want to have just on-demand content that we're pushing our student audience to on a regular basis. And if we go back to the examples of the legacy media and those sorts of pieces, I think when we talk about media consumption and that evolution, our virtual tours and virtual view books, those are the primary focus on a lot of those is physical locations, right? It's showcasing buildings, it's showcasing facilities and those sorts of things. Again, necessary for a certain point in time, But this is like going to something for, the VHS tape or the DVD. We don't necessarily have that as our standard way of engaging content anymore, right? We might have a library somewhere that we point to, but it's not the big focus of what we do. So when we think about the live content, this is really thinking about our Zoom meetings and our WebEx meetings as our live broadcast television, right? We have CBS, NBC, Fox, etc. But the reality is even with these individual live television stations, there's always an on-demand element after this, or the expectation of the on-demand element after this. And so having these experiences without an on-demand element afterwards is a big hole in the way that our students expect to be engaged and expect to utilize content. So what we would recommend is thinking about how do you build your own robust branded on-demand library with a steady stream of fresh releases. That's the Disney Plus or the Hulu effect, right? Hulu is, you have live television the day before, and then there's some of it available on demand the next day. But there's also a robust library of on-demand content. Disney Plus, they parse out new content. What am I going to do immediately after this webcast? I'm going to turn on Disney Plus because I know that Loki came out at 3 o'clock this morning and I want to watch it today. How do I know this? I got the email from Disney Plus reminding me that it's new, right? And so Disney Plus doesn't care doesn't care when I watch these shows. They care that I watch these shows. And so we have to rethink our engagement plans around not just virtual events, because events are moments in time. We have to think about events as really all of those different interactions. Every presentation a student watches, every link that they click on our site, every document that they download is an event that we should be looking at and measuring as a part of our process. And that's where the opportunity to support and connect the Conduit platform with Engage allows for that type of analytics to happen. So just a couple examples of these. My team loves to make fun of me when I use these examples, but from that content release perspective, think about it as you get those emails on your phone every day from Netflix, from HBO Max, from Disney Plus, new now, watch the trailer, watch on demand, check out these programs. And when you click it and it brings you to the HBO Max branded environment where you're consuming content. You can create this same type of an experience as an institution. Do your search emails say learn more and go to an RFI form? Or do they say watch now and go to a branded environment where students can engage with content and use that engage like Disney will do or like Netflix will do to personalize the experience and personalize the follow-up? How do we create those types of experiences to support our students better through this process? So it's no longer a admissions marketing campaign. It's an enrollment marketing and a content marketing campaign. And so that's how we have to rethink the way we're going to use virtual content in the future. Virtual events are a type of virtual content, just like an on-demand video is, just like a pre-recorded video is. So, Anne, I'm going to kick it to you because I know you've got a couple of great examples to share of this already in action.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple of partners. So if you want to, let's go ahead and click through here. And I'll talk a little bit about what folks are seeing. Top right-hand corner. This is a lot of what we typically exchange, what partners that utilize not only Engage, but Conduit are able to bring into their CRM today. The date that they visited, the application decile for capture is the likelihood of this student to apply to the institution, number of web visits, number of page views, affinity index for those that aren't familiar, that's a life cycle score. How much time has this particular student spent engaging with content since we've been able to track this particular student? That's the affinity index. Engagement score, recent history. So what you're looking at here and why this is all relevant is not only are we able to share with institutions what this student was doing on the front end when they were considered what Capture would call anonymous. Maybe the student is a non-responder to your search campaign. They're truly stealth, or there's somebody who's just certainly not responding to your content. Capture's still able to help you understand through Engage what that student is doing and what they're looking at. We were able to actually identify this particular student because they filled out a PID form, that progressive identification form. But where we're able to really tie the power of Engage and Conduit is because of our relationship with Conduit, the marriage of those Q tokens and the Engage enabled links, we're able to watch this student as they're experiencing Conduit content in their channel. From there, we can then bring that data back into Engage and trigger dynamic content as a function of knowing what this student has experienced. Gail, I know you like to talk a little bit about the bookends, what's happening on either side. Actually, let's go to the next vignette and we'll talk a little bit about this particular student, and then you can fold in a little bit about the before and after.
Sure.
Again, this particular student I think is very, very interesting because they have an international presence. So we're able to not only help our institutions understand domestically what are students and their influencers looking at, but as you have individuals that are coming to your website as a function of digital advertising or any of the other channels in which you're communicating, we can help students navigate this process. In this case, Conduit is really sandwiched in between the power of Engage to communicate with the student anonymously when we didn't know them in March of 2021, and now in a place in May in which we know exactly who they are. Gil, do you want to talk a little bit about that Conduit experience that happened in between that gave us the power to identify?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most powerful elements here, right? Is on the left-hand side, you see that all of this activity is tailored based on amazing things like IP address. Great, we know they're an international student. Let's serve them specific content that we know they're going to need just in time, right? But the real power here is that once they attend a event on Conduit or consume Conduit content on the Conduit platform, now we've identified that prospect, and all of that anonymous activity that happened prior and all of the activity that they do after is unified in a single record, right? And so we can be a much more predictive and much more prescriptive with the outreach that we're doing, because we can now collect and have all that data analyzed throughout the process. So when we talk about their affinity index, when we talk about their engagement score, Conduit's a highly predictive element on the likelihood of applying and the likelihood of enrolling, because the students who are engaging with that content are engaging in a really rich media setting and looking for information that's tailored specifically for them. So I think that the opportunity here is to say, if you could look at the full engagement life cycle with a student and not just what happened after you identified them under application, this is a way to do that and make sure that you're doing it for a greater percentage of your class.
Agreed. I know we've got one more here that I think is pretty important to make sure that we talk about outcomes. Obviously, everybody joined us today because we're interested in knowing whether or not some of these interventions are driving students to enroll. I love this particular example because what we're able to display here is that not only does Engage through dynamic content encourage this student to tell us who they are by serving that PID form, we have that just in time. I heard this again with another Platform Q and Conduit partner, the notion of just-in-time content, recognizing that 5 different elements of this person's behavior drove the type of content they were seeing on screen. What I love about this admitted student event and the Conduit moment here in February is that if we think about the question that was asked in my client meeting yesterday, what are we learning? How are we using this data? What we're able to display here, and when folks ask, did this Conduit event move the needle? Did this student actually do what we asked them to as a function of their experience? We're able to help this institution understand that as a function of experiencing this admitted student event, the student went on to deposit. Not only did they go on to deposit, but they went on to visit the site 13 more times and see 80 different pages. I know that sounds really, really granular, and it will get really granular. That's the power of this robust data. The glory and the beautiful moment of the managed service from Capture is that we helped make this data actionable. So did we get the response that we were looking for, and that the student experienced content, learned more about being an admitted student on this campus, and then went on to deposit and enroll? These are the types of experiences that we want to be able to replicate and do to scale. And the relationship between Engage and Conduit has created a situation in which we don't have to lose that student. They don't fall through the cracks, spending time on our website and then going out to consume additional content. We're able to really show that entire journey, that student decision journey, for our partners in real time so that they can learn from it and do more of these types of interventions in the future. That notion, to your slide earlier, of traditional legacy tactics, they certainly haven't gone away. It's just a matter of timing, and our relationship gives institutions the ability to measure timing more so than anything.
We've shared examples of this in the past as well. Using the affinity index to determine who gets the print piece, promoting a virtual event, right? That's the type of actionable insight that you get from this, or being able to see what students attended a financial aid session that then completed their FAFSA the next week, right? And so this is the type of insight that you get when you can when you can combine these two things together, right? And so I know we want to leave some time for some questions. Just, we got our contact information there on the screen. If you work with Platform Q and want to talk about how we incorporate the Engage platform into your overall plan, please shoot me an email or reach out to your engagement strategist. We're happy to support. And if you're a Capture client and you work with Platform Q and you want to incorporate the Conduit platform into your plans, Anne's details are there as well. And if you're folks that are attending that don't work with either companies, that's great. Contact either of us. We'll point you in the right direction. We're here to support. We see the power of these platforms working together as a way to really help to enroll more and support students throughout the entire process with continuous engagement. So with that, I will ask Heather to hop back in and start heckling us and let us know what we how we can help next.
I gotta tell you, I was so disappointed that you ended on time. I was ready to sing playoff music.
We do our best.
Heather, we do actually have one question for them. If you wanna ask that before Gil and Ann have to hop off.
For sure. So we have posted up on the screen, maybe a Greenhorns question. How do we keep track of student engagement when it happens across various media? For example, how do we get everything into one basket?
Gil, I'll take that one.
I think
that first of all, no question is a greenhorn question. Technology evolves every single day. So I'm always learning. And it's a really great question that I'm sure many are asking. The power of Engage gives us the ability to do exactly what you just described, to bring all of that rich interaction across multiple different forms of media into a central place. We could certainly talk, and I'd be happy to share my information so we can talk more about UTM tracking and why that matters. But any area in which you're driving prospective students and their families, we would encourage that you have tracking code and you have the ability to measure it in real time in a student profile. So Engage through Capture gives us the ability to do that, whether it's digital advertisement, an email communication, or in this case, our lovely relationship with Conduit surrounding all of the virtual content that's being stored. So it can be a little bit more of a technical deep dive in the event that anybody wants to do that. I'm happy to, but Engage is the exact tool that becomes that basket for you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think one of the elements here is the reason why Platform Q partners with Capture on this integration is because the Conduit platform is one of those places where engagement with your audience happens, right? And if we can make that connection seamless, that helps you to incorporate, did our virtual content work this year? Hard to say when it's a fragmented Zoom session here and a WebEx session here and a Facebook Live and all these sorts of things. But when you're driving students to a platform that's integrated from a back-end reporting architecture with the Engage platform, you can then be more finely attuned into what the outcomes actually are versus just having anonymous traffic everywhere.
Awesome. Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Anne, so much. Hey, it was great hearing from you guys, especially because I feel like Platform Q was such a consistent name we heard across our partners while they recruited their 2021 class. And I really enjoyed hearing all the creative ideas that our partners had for these virtual events and trying to make them as impactful as possible. So now we've got an opportunity to hear from the folks who are actually doing the tough work. We've got a panel joining us to talk for a little bit about how they're going to take this virtual recruitment cycle that they've been through and blend it into this hybrid for 2022 recruitment. And I'm very excited to have the panel with us. So joining us now, we have 4 members of the Capture family. We've got Dr. Eric Stokes. He's the Assistant Vice Provost of Strategic Enrollment Management at the University of Memphis. Mary Wagner, Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management and Executive Director of Admissions for the University of South Carolina. Colin Palmer, the Director of Admissions for the University of Toledo. And Caitlin Shear. Caitlin is the Director of Integrated Enrollment Marketing Communication at George Mason University. Man, you guys have some big, long titles to get me to spit out here. But thank you guys so much for joining.
It's so good to see your faces.
Great to be here.
Heather and I miss being able to go to campuses, so just let us know when we can come and visit.
Anytime.
Oh my gosh, you guys have fun.
Thanks, Heather. Well, let's jump right in because I have just so many questions for you guys today. Before we dig too much into the virtual events, there is another significant change that happened during this recruitment cycle that impacted your campuses. And that's the shift to being test optional for the year. And many of our campuses went test optional. Just wanted to pick your brains for a minute. If you went this route, can you share insights on how it impacted your incoming class? GPA, test score averages, total applicants, any details that you've noticed at this point in time in the cycle. Eric, do you have any insight on that for your campus?
Sure. Lauren, thank you for having us. Greetings to the rest of the panel. I'm privileged to be here with you fine people, and welcome to everybody out there in cyber world. To get to your question, I'll try to be brief. Yes, it had a huge impact on our admission this year. We were able to admit over 3,500 students without an ACT or an SAT score. And so these are generally students who we may not have admitted in the past if we stuck only to ACT scores. So it really increased our admit pool. In fact, our largest admit class that we've had. So we had a great admission pool to choose from, and not at the detriment of our academic profile. We were able to maintain our profiling. In fact, we actually increased our GPA by 1 point. So that was great to hear. So hopefully we'll see that impacted yield positively as well. So we're hopeful in that sense, because typically, like I said, some of these students we may not have admitted in the past. And so we're hoping to have great results there.
Mary, what about at the University of South Carolina? Any insights into your class? Oh, we can't hear you, Mary. Nope. I'll tell you what, while Mary troubleshoots, Colin, do you have any insight from Toledo?
Sure. So like Eric at Memphis last year, we did see a slight increase in our profile, even with implementing Ohio's first public university test optional admission policy. So far this year, I just ran the numbers yesterday, about 56.5% of our entering class of 2021 has applied without test scores. So I don't know if that was lower or higher than I anticipated, or perhaps, right in line with what we thought it might be, but it looks like just a little over half for next year. And we've decided to make that a permanent policy moving forward, because it's worked out for us so well so far.
Fantastic. Mary, can we hear you now?
How about now?
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for having me. And yeah, like I think most institutions, if you weren't test optional before and you went test optional for the first time, like we did this past year, we definitely saw a lift. What we saw was because so many of the testing patterns were a little bit staggered, and we get applications from students in different regions of the country. We saw that, depending on what was going on locally, that might impact when people would apply. So I think when we were kind of moving in to the first deadline that we have, which is our non-binding early action around mid-October, things were kind of lagging and people were waiting until the last minute. But then everybody decided, they would apply at the last minute for the December 1 deadline. And I think a lot of students, just because they may have wanted to apply with test scores if they could, and they knew they didn't have to, but a lot of them kind of held out to see if they would have access to testing, and then would make their decision to apply test optional or not at that point. And like other institutions, we had a record number of applications. We had, I'd say about 40% of the students, didn't submit test scores, and we had about 42,000 applications this year. But we didn't see a significant difference in yield between test optional students and those who submitted test scores. And so a lot of that may have to do with, we get a lot of our applications from out of state also. So distance from home and cost of attendance and things like that are, probably some factors there as well. But those are some of the things that we observed that kind of changed up our operations this year.
Caitlin, any other insights from George Mason?
Well, Mason was in a unique position. I've been at Mason over 10 years, and we were score optional before I came onto the scene. And so it didn't really have a huge impact. I know we had been accommodating applications without scores for many, many years in our holistic review process. And so I know we had more applications from Virginia, but I'm not sure that it was related to the fact that we're score optional.
Show of hands, who's remaining test optional for 2022 recruitment? All right. Seems to be pretty standard. What about, can anyone speak to how this has changed your application review process? Or is there anything you've learned this year that helped you streamline to be more prepared to review all those applications for 2022?
Well, I can start. It certainly pushed us to think a little bit more outside the traditional norms. We always have done holistic review, kind of the way Caitlin said, but we haven't been as robust as we had to do this year because not having that test score factor. And so we had to look at other means. Our admissions process is built on kind of expedited review. That's kind of the competitive advantage we try to have. And so we had to think about how can we continue to review students and try to maintain that accelerated decision-making process. And so what we had to do was look at creating a questionnaire. So we created a supplemental review questionnaire, kind of built on the framework of Selichek's non-cognitive variables as kind of a foundation for that. And so that allowed us to capture more information that we normally don't ask on our application for some students. And so that helped us with an additional review process. And then also for merit scholarships, we did a similar process in terms of creating a questionnaire, as well as we had to rethink for our English and math placement. Some of our faculty were very stuck in, tied to test scores and placement. And so we had to get them to try to think about how we can think about other ways that we can place students. So we came up with some alternative means of placement there. And so that was something really good. And I think all of those processes will continue for next year with a few reflection and revision with them.
Great. Let's jump in and talk about virtual events, because I know that's the reason why a lot of our listeners are here today. First of all, my first question, and Caitlin, if you want to go first with this one, when it comes to virtual events, what setup proved to have the best conversions on applicants or yield for your campus?
Well, obviously, we're still calculating. Our admitted or deposited students are just signing up for orientation now. So many of those calculations are still being done. But, the strategy for virtual events really took off. And, everybody had to pivot so quickly, but we have seen the attendance be nearly what an in-person event would have been for our big yield events last spring and this spring. And so it's been very successful. So I'd say moving forward, the fall strategy is not to try to blend, but to basically do both and have opportunities both in person and virtually for students to get to know Mason. I assume everybody else has something similar on their campuses.
Absolutely. Colin, when it comes to the setup of events for Toledo, did you notice a difference in conversion between large group sessions, smaller regional sessions? What did you guys play around with within metrics to decide what worked best for your campus?
Sure. So in spring of 2020, when we first started offering virtual events, we saw attendance and registration for those increase from students outside of the Midwest. I think a lot of institutions saw students from further away, join because those opportunities were available. And so we found that focusing invitations and sessions on students in certain geographic regions to be very helpful. So at the University of Toledo, a regional Midwestern institution, we had 15 students attend our Florida and Georgia event. For us, we were so excited about that. And it's interesting, we were one of the early institutions to bring on-campus visits back in 2020, and that those students from further away, that attendance transitioned from virtual events into in-person events, and that was very exciting for us. At a spring event, we had 15 states represented at one of them, and that was quite a large success for us. So I would say that the smaller regionally based or academic based events for us were more successful than a large virtual open house. But again, because we were able to bring on campus events, we used our virtual events to kind of complement that rather than replace those.
We heard earlier from Jacksonville University that the pre-recorded sessions and being able to play those on demand really helped them with recruiting in the graduate market. Mary or Eric, any insight into how pre-recorded versus live events worked for your campuses?
Yeah, I'll talk about that because we really did make heavy use of Platform Q this year, and we had never used it before, and we used it for a general open house event in the fall, as well as admitted student events in the spring. And so, by almost doing more just-in-time messaging around this is what's going to be going on this week and providing reminders of what is going to happen on each night, rather than trying to jam it all in one day, kind of breaking it up into more digestible, smaller pieces, and then just kind of reminding people of what they may have missed in the past week and that they could go back and look at stuff, seemed to be very successful for us. So we just know that our own time is very fragmented, and we can only imagine what that's like for students. And so trying to be, responsive to, I think what we've all kind of come to expect is, okay, I'd really like to go and see that thing, but I know it's being recorded, so I'll go back and watch it on my own time. But you also don't want it to take an hour and a half to get all the content that you want, letting people know that you've got those little snippets of all those different topics and that they can go back and watch those on demand. Really just helped us get a lot of traction and get a lot more exposure rather than just doing it right at the moment that they were available to meet with us.
Awesome. Eric, how did the University of Memphis handle pre-recorded versus live events?
Yeah, the same as kind of what everybody else said. I'll just kind of reiterate really what Mary mentioned about the after the fact watching them on demand. At first, we were a little freaked out when we didn't see those attendance numbers kind of jump up where we wanted them for some of the virtual events. And we tried to do most of our virtual events live, but we record them and then would put them in a content for a later review. And we noticed that people were still viewing that content, not just students, but parents too. And so that kind of helped us to kind of ease our minds and know that people just want to, it made a strong case for offering a diverse array of methods for students to engage with us, students and families, because some want to do it live, some want to do it on their own time, some want to do it before they come to a campus visit, some do it after a campus visit. So we'll, as Caitlin mentioned, kind of use a blended version of all those kind of things for the fall semester. And really just to add, what worked really well with us too were the one-on-ones with our admissions counselors. Students seem to really want to sign up for one-on-ones, which we hadn't been doing in pre-pandemic. And so that's something we'll definitely want to keep post-pandemic.
So what about the admissions-led versus faculty-led sessions? Did you guys experiment with faculty-led sessions, and did you learn anything from those about program-specific events in the future?
Go ahead, Caitlin.
I was just going to say, I don't know that we had faculty-led. We had faculty participating and then staff from the colleges, but certainly it worked for us to get the colleges in front of the students earlier in the funnel than we might have in a particular year. And so to do early events in the fall that allowed a piggyback event onto a larger event allowed the college to get the attendance that they wanted. And so these breakout and niches often had current students and faculty as part of it. And they were all live, but, taped for, later viewing. But we also grouped events around a particular theme, like certain majors or campus experiences around global education or social justice, to allow some smaller programs to cluster efforts. And that worked really well.
Mary, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we all know that some faculty are probably more adept at this, being up front than others. You just kind of hold your breath and you don't know what they're going to say. And so having the ability to kind of pre-record content and then either, put it in some sort of a platform that people can go back and watch that, or have it presented in tandem with a live event, like some sort of a chat event or, a panel and all, can be really, really helpful because they can practice and you can get it just right.
Awesome.
It's always good to prep your faculty in advance, be selective in who you choose. A lot of people want to help, but yeah, not everybody's great for these things.
Okay, so travel is back this fall, maybe a little modified from what it has been in the past, but now we're in the conundrum of we had so many virtual events and they did do well, and now we've got to get our admissions counselors back out on the road. I want to hear from each of you on this situation. How are you handling this balance of needing to host these events and needing to have that live time in the field? And Colin, you want to start us off with this?
Well, I don't think that I have that completely figured out yet. Just because, in Ohio, we just announced last year that our ACAC will be sponsoring in-person college fairs. NACAC is not hosting in-person fairs in the fall. I mean, there's just the constant changes and how that's going to look. I think that, at least from my perspective, all of us will recognize the need to have both in-person and virtual events at every stage in the funnel moving forward. I certainly hope, for the sake of our staff here, but also the students and influencers that we hope to connect with, that we won't have to have them at quite the rate or length that we may have done over the past year. But I do hope that what our hope is, if we're connecting with a student online, or even if we're connecting with a student at a regional event in Cincinnati or Detroit or wherever, the ultimate hope is that they'll make the investment in visiting campus and visiting the university. So I think as long as we keep the information sharing and the affinity building, second to driving that campus visit and that real connection point, that would probably help lead our strategy moving forward.
Caitlin, what about George Mason?
I mean, I think it's the same. It's a delicate balance. I know the admissions office is looking at their travel now and trying to plan. I mean, virtual events and virtual tour opportunities are just an important part of our access mission too. Not everybody can afford to come to campus. And so it's something that would always stay part of our portfolio for the students that we're serving.
Mary, do you anticipate continuing to use the same pre-recorded sessions, or will you guys push out more or different versions of the sessions for this recruitment cycle?
I think that remains to be seen. We'll want to go back and look at the content to see whether or not it's dated, and so we'll certainly do that. But I think virtual is going to be a part of the brand plan for the indefinite future. I mean, I just knowing that you were able to reach so many people at different time zones, like just one of the anecdotes that I found to be pretty impressive. We held an event that was actually a live chat event. I think we may have even done it on Zoom, but we advertised it and we emailed people on the West Coast about it, and we did it a little bit later for us, but local time was going to be around 7 o'clock West Coast time, and so we had people stay up late to work the chat, and we had people on the East Coast show up for that event, which just tells you that students are doing stuff at odd hours of the day, and if you're available when they're available, they will show up. So I think that that sort of thing, there's going to be that expectation that having that kind of on-demand real interaction, even if it's virtual, that students like it.
Yeah.
Eric, any other insight from the University of Memphis?
I agree with everything everybody else said, so I won't piggyback on all that. But I think that on-demand content, it's going to be a arms race, if you will, of who can create the best content, the most engaging content. And I think students are going to look to see new stuff when they come back. So I think it will push admissions offices to be nimble in what we create out there.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this breakdown of virtual visits versus on-campus visits. I know everyone on this call had a different policy for when they were allowed to bring visitors to campus and how large those groups could be. And you probably have a larger pool than ever before that hasn't actually set foot on campus and has done everything virtual. Tell me a little bit about that breakdown of your class, and not just percentage-wise who's been to campus and who hasn't, but how are you taking that virtual visit into calculations for predictions for your class this fall?
Well, we didn't know what the impact is going to be this year because it was the first year we've ever had to do the two, but we definitely saw some differences between people who were virtual only or in person only, and then the people who had both. And if somebody went out of their way to do both, that's a pretty engaged student. And we did see a higher rate of yield on those students. But we also got a pretty significant number of people who, never participated in any of those things that we know of, right? They may have been able to, find another way or attend, on a parent's desktop or something like that. Maybe they weren't attracted some way and all. But I think that, those things will definitely come into play when we look at next year. But we also expect that things will, hopefully we'll have more people come to campus. But I think for some of these virtual kids, we still had a pretty good yield on people who participated in virtual only stuff. And for people who are farther afield, I think people are going to be comfortable, using that as a way to get to know a campus if they really want to go there.
Caitlin, what about from George Mason?
No, I think that's true. And, we had lifted a virtual experience page in the spring of 20 that wasn't just limited. Obviously, we have a tour through UVisit, but was really a curated page of content that changed frequently so that, you could go back and it had spotlights of students and faculty and just all the kinds of things that we were imagining students would want to see, particularly from our student vloggers. Hearing directly from the student in a vlog got tremendous traction. And so that will continue to be part of the overall virtual visit strategy.
Great. Colin, what about you guys in Toledo?
I feel like we've touched on a lot of it. I know engaging current students with prospective students in more than just a virtual student panel seems to be a bit challenging. And so we did really try to invest in in creating our own social media influencers at the university and just trying to connect those students through our class of 2025 Facebook groups and any number of things. And so those were some ways we just tried to build those connections, and also just to keep parents and influencers engaged and involved digitally in those spaces that didn't necessarily require logging into a session at a certain time or watching something pre-recorded. Those were a large part of our yield efforts, especially.
I want to talk about those influencers in just a second. Before we leave virtual events overall, what was your favorite virtual event that your campus hosted this year, and why was it your favorite? Eric, you want to go first?
I knew you were going to start with me. Yeah. I don't know if it's my favorite so much, but I was really shocked and surprised. I guess you could say my favorite was we did a series of alumni hosted events based on career fields. So like law and industry or business, STEM, technology, education. And we had the best alumni that signed up, everything from first year teachers to principals that were all alums of Memphis, attorneys, everything you can think of, federal, state, private industry. And we had a great response from students and families. It was great engagement. They asked a lot of questions. I was excited about them in the beginning, like, oh, this is great. It's a great way to engage alumni and yada, yada, yada. But not knowing what the response would be, I was really impressed with that. And so that's something we'll continue, and we'll see how that goes.
Caitlin, what was your favorite at GMU?
I think it was the large spring yield events. We did the same thing. The admissions events team did the same thing that Mary mentioned at University of South Carolina. They broke it up into 3 days. And so that helped, I think, target what students wanted to see and how to break it up to not have to absorb everything all at once. We saw that be very successful in terms of attendance. We also made an investment in the production value of what we were pre-recording and the packages that we were able to feature on that. So I know that made a big difference in how successful the event was.
Colin?
Yeah, we've traditionally hosted an invitation-only scholarship competition for students early in the spring, typically around late January, early February. This year we hosted that in person, but also hosted it virtually. And that was such a unique experience. It was broken up by academic college. And so being in each college's session, and typically the College of Engineering, we're the Rockets at the University of Toledo. So we like to have, rocket building competitions or something like that. But just seeing how they engaged with students and learned more about them and their experiences and kind of expectations of their collegiate experience, I think was just very enlightening for me, especially earlier on in the spring when we were still trying to figure out what the spring was going to look like, how were we going to, work through the rest of yield and things like that.
Awesome. Mary, what about South Carolina?
Well, a lot of the same similar types of events. We did our scholarship interviewing online. We did our admitted student day stuff online. But I think more than anything, what I've liked about admissions events is while all of us hated doing this shift to doing everything online, I was so, and we, of course, we're all planning things thinking like these kids are never going to show up. I mean, everyone's got to be Zoomed out. I'm dying over here on my side of the computer. How can they not be hired? And yet they showed. And so I was always pleasantly surprised and delighted by how engaged students were willing to be, because they're really, really, they're really serious about their future and they really want to set themselves up well. And so I'm really delighted by the resiliency of this particular class that had already just gone through so much and lost so much at the end of their junior year and didn't get to look at stuff over the summer. And they're like, all right, let's do this. And they did it. And so, and we helped them. And virtual, I think, is one of those things that all of us have wanted to dive down into. I mean, who did not go back and look at their online tour in a different way and think, wow, maybe this is not as good as it should be. We all went back and redid that. We all thought, like, I got some videos, but they ain't that great. I'm going to have to hire somebody to do it. We all did that.
Yeah.
I think we just all ended up doubling down on the stuff that we've all had put on our wish list for years. And now we're like, all right, we're there. We're doing this.
So this environment gave us a time to invest extra dollars into video production. Caitlin, you guys said that you invested significantly in the production value of some of your pieces, but also this generation is very focused on the influencers and the live time video with low production value. Did you guys notice on your campus any preference between the student population on one type of event versus another?
I think we saw engagement with both. I really think that the videos that our student workers do as part of the vlog series are as valuable in a different way from the more highly produced marketing videos that we do. I think there's room for it all.
I think we have time for one more question, and I want to shift our focus over to the influencers that you all mentioned before. And advertising to this group has always been important to us, but I think now more than ever, we've really noticed that the parents and the counselors had a lot of influence, and the club leaders as well over the class, and we missed out on that at some points during this past year. So this year we've seen a shift at Capture of more and more schools wanting to focus in on those influencers and hosting events and communicating with those groups specifically. At the inquiry generation level, or at very specific communication plans for parents and counselors, do you guys have plans for 2022 to make those an integrated part of your recruitment cycle, or are those plans still up in the air for you? Lots of nodding heads. Caitlin, how are you guys handling that group within your campus?
Sure. We had, for a number of years, had a counselor newsletter, and the admissions office had done a traditional counselor fly-in event on campus, which they did virtually. So those will certainly continue, likely in both versions. We also took another look at our parent plan, specifically in yield, to address some of the pain points. understanding the financial aid package, understanding the bill, understanding the process, and what, the next steps that students have to take once they're admitted. And so we definitely augmented our parent plan in that way for the kinds of students that we serve. We serve a lot of first generation, and so it was definitely helpful to add to that plan.
What about a breakdown between email communication with parents versus hosted events? Does anyone have any insight onto their campus's preference or how they'll be dividing it up for this incoming class?
Well, I think getting parents on board is definitely a strategy. I mean, they're paying for it more often than not, and
Yeah.
they're pretty entitled to getting a lot of firsthand information. And so we would see a lot of times events that were designed for students, parents would show up for them. So I don't think that that's ever going to go away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Eric, did you have something to add there, or Colin does?
Go ahead, Eric.
Go ahead, Colin. Okay. I'll just say I was glad to hear what Caitlin was saying in terms of with counselors and parents and things like that. We actually had we didn't have a great turnout to our counselor. I'm trying to engage with counselors just because they were so busy, particularly in the fall with everything going on in schools. And so they really they already don't have much time for us. And so events didn't go so well. So we'll have to think about other ways to engage our school counselors, because that was kind of a struggle for us, because a lot of our schools in our area have been virtual for so long. And so we're looking forward to try to get back to some changes this fall. But that was the area we struggled in, was engaging school counselors.
Yeah.
I know a lot of our conversations with parents and guardians, especially for next year, is going to be talking about the health of their student comprehensively, their academic health, social and emotional health, physical health, and focusing a little bit more on that and how that means more than just succeeding in the classroom and staying well when living in a residence hall, but just more comprehensively their health, which obviously supports their persistence and graduation.
Yeah, that's definitely been a significant shift in focus from families this year that we've noticed too. Well, I thank you guys so much for joining us today. I can't believe we're already out of time. But I really do appreciate each one of you guys coming in and speaking to our group today. I'm sure we probably have some questions floating out there on all of our live platforms, and we may have to gather the group back up in not too long for some additional conversations. But thank you guys so much. Heather's back with us. Hey,
Hey! That was fantastic.
Thanks, everybody.
Every time we get the opportunity to talk with folks like you and other enrollment and marketing professionals, reflecting on the last 18 months, the staggering amount of creativity, right, that is really born out of this moment where the normal toolbox was tucked away into a drawer from the pandemic, never ceases to amaze me. What you all have done on your campuses and for your prospective students and their families is impressive and awe-inspiring. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. Caitlin, Colin, Eric, Mary, you're the best. You're the best.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Lauren.
Heather.
What an incredible panel.
I know. So much to say, so much to talk about. I had so many more questions to ask.
I know. And I'm sorry we didn't get to, Jeff had asked a question out there in the virtual world and we didn't get a chance to get to it. But as Lauren hinted, we may be coming back with more panel opportunities and more time for that conversation as we roll. So we're getting close to the end of day one of Innovate 2021.
I believe it.
Lauren, I think we have one last giveaway.
All right, let's see who's been using our hashtag Innovate 2021 tag on LinkedIn.
Drum roll.
We're giving away our master class pass. It's a 1-year all access pass. Man, this is a good one.
Okay.
Shonda Gibson from Texas A&M University System. Congratulations.
Congrats, Shonda. That
You
is
can share that with me if you want to, Shonda. Just a reminder that we're going to continue our giveaways tomorrow as well. So keep using hashtag Innovate 2021. Every time you use it, you get entered into the drawing, and we're going to have some other great prizes tomorrow when we're back for day 2. And also, don't forget, we've got our donations up for the Boys and Girls Club of America and the National Urban League. Wonderful organizations doing amazing work. And remember that Capture is going to match attendee donations up to $5,000. So we're very excited to see those donations continue coming in.
Absolutely. Lauren, I don't know about you, but right after we wrap, I'm going to log on, hop onto that link and go make my donation for today. I was too busy taking notes in between to get that done, but definitely want to support those organizations. The day has been amazing. We've had the opportunity to hear from Len, our CEO, kicking things off, Dr. Nixon talking about creativity and wonder and rigor and the combination of the two, our friends at Jacksonville University blurring the lines, so to speak, and Gil and Anne presenting on the combination of Platform Q's conduit and engage in the power of the insights, to the point of some of our attendees, the ability to really aggregate data and make it incredibly actionable, as Vinny indicated at the JU session. And finally, with you and the rest of our presenters, Caitlin, Colin, Eric, and Mary sharing their insights from the last year. We hope that you found some value in all of that. What do you think, Lauren? What was your favorite part of the day?
Oh my gosh. Way to put me on the spot.
I know.
I have to give a shout out to our Jacksonville presentation. I thought just phenomenal, very actionable, very specific items, great takeaways there. But every session today has been fantastic. I've got some new reading material from Natalie. So I've got some beach reading to do from that presentation. And it's always great to catch up with our Capture partners and hear how things are going on their campuses. So all in all, great day, A+ day, right?
A+.
Got to top it tomorrow somehow.
My gosh. Speaking of tomorrow, we have some really awesome things on the lineup. We're going to start with our opening keynote, which is our very own Leonard Napolitano, our CEO. He will be sitting down with Dr. Wesley Fugate, the president of Wilson College in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. And they're going to discuss Dr. Fugate's recent diversity, equity, and inclusivity initiative and how it's impacting enrollment management today. So I'm super pumped for that session.
That's a huge topic on everyone's minds right now.
For sure. For sure. Following that, we have our very own data scientist, John Foster. Colin's going to bring back the heat from panel to presenter with a talk about using data clarity to inform your creativity. So I'm excited to lift data up tomorrow and see how we can make more of it even more actionable. We also have Beth Kazaraskis from the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis, who will talk about how her institution recently put a new brand to work for student recruitment. And then to close out the conference, and this is pretty exciting, our final keynote, The Art and Science of Brand Building, will be presented by Matt Blevins. He's the Vice President of Global Brand Director, and Global Brand Director for Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey, and has held a range of management roles that involve brand positioning and communication across several labels. He'll be helping us understand the latest evidence-based ways to build your brand and reach your audience. He'll also share his experiences building one of the world's most iconic brands and how to apply those lessons to other brand building efforts. It's quite an action-packed day too.
It is.
Oh my gosh. And of course, we will have more prizes and giveaways, including those scholarships that we talked about throughout. We've got AirPods, gift cards, and even more. So make sure you keep posting on social media, hashtag Innovate 2021 to get all of your entries in for one of those great prizes. Man, Lauren, I think it's a wrap.
I think it is. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. We're excited to see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Have a great day, gang. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye,
Same time,
everybody.
same place.